Hello and welcome to the Fright Train. Our destination is going to be terror, fear, horror, suspense. And on our first stop ever, we're going to be going to a beautiful place called SummerIsle. Because
Oh,
today we'll be talking about 1973's The Wicker Man. And nothing bad can happen on a beautiful island in the middle of Scotland, can it? But joining me on my journey is the lovely, and I'm going to try and do the pointy thing, but I always get it wrong. Oh, I got it right. The
yes.
lovely Mr. Culley. And it's
Hello.
our first rider on the Fright Train. So all aboard. Toot
Toot
toot.
toot.
It's a pleasure to have you on here, and new to the channel
Thank
as
you.
well.
First,
It's
first
first
ever
time
time
on this.
on. Yes, first ever YouTube video, Michael. I am
Well, it's
busted
long been
open
a
today.
dream of me to get you on video. I actually thought it would be
Legitimately.
a different kind of video than this, but this might be the gateway into that. Before we get into the Wicker Man, though,
Hmm.
as the idea of the Fright Train is going to be looking at horror movies, I thought it was only fair to maybe ask you, horror. Do you like it? Is it a genre you vibe with, or is it something where you play with it when it's good?
Do you know what? I think it's something I was never big into it as a kid. Like I had a mate. He had seen Nightmare on Elm Street from the get go. It was just fine and dandy to him. And I remember that was the first one that I watched. And yeah, I wasn't a fan for a few years after, but yeah, I like him, but then there was a formula to all the ones when we were growing up, especially. So pre jump scare stuff
Yeah,
and paranormal activity and the Japanese Ring, which was I suppose the next thing that came out that was so different that was actually can't look down a well ever again for fear of what might come crawling out. I'll
ne-
scream.
ne-
I'm not going to deny it. I'm
never
not ashamed.
never answer the phone ever again. And as for a long time, that was my job. I wasn't very
Yeah.
effective. Yeah.
Hello, Michael.
Yeah, I was just so afraid of someone going 7 days at the end of it. I was going, no, fuck off, never answered the phone again. One of the reasons why I kind of wanted to do something like this is horror's just so wide, isn't it? I
Yeah.
think when you look at like movie genres, I think there's probably more releases packed into the horror genre than anything else. Partially because you can make a lot of it kind of relatively cheaply, etc., etc., etc. And they're so varied, and not only varied in the stories they're trying to tell, the mediums that it's kind of in, but also the quality. And
Yes.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I kind of hope that for most of these, like, we'll be talking about good horror movies or horror movies we've enjoyed and things like that. But I'm sure every now and again there'll be an absolute plopsy one that comes down the line,
Oh,
and
undoubtedly, but never not for a lack of enthusiasm.
well,
Just budget.
and some of those plopsy ones like kind of take on legendary status themselves, don't they? Because they're so bad, they kind of slot somehow into their so bad it's good. I
Yeah,
guess to a degree.
just too well known that everyone's like, "Oh, go on then, I'll give it a go."
Yeah, like or kind of what they used to call like the water cooler thing, but like going, oh my god, everyone, you must watch this. It's terrible.
This is some shit. You need to see it.
Funny enough, I was kind of I say the opposite of you. I know I would have said that I wasn't necessarily the biggest horror boy growing up, but I watched a lot growing up because I grew up in a time with video shops,
Hmm.
and we had a local video shop, and the local video shop would have kind of the big movies of the time, but it would have one copy of them, and like you'd have to probably kill everyone in the village to get a chance of actually hiring that. But outside of that, they just had a wall of horror and a
Yep.
wall of martial arts.
Yeah.
So over a long period of time, I
Just
think
work your way through 'em.
we watched every single horror and every single martial arts because that's the only option we had. And some of it good, some of it not so good. But I think for me it is. I think you can do some amazingly powerful storytelling with horror in
Hmm.
all of its forms, and also you can just break it down to kind of slasher, schlocky, and that's not to say all slasher movies are bad, but you can go very reductive with it and just
Eli
knock out something
Roth.
quite simple. Yeah, torture porn.
Like, there's
Yeah,
your horror house ride,
yeah,
So
yeah. And so yeah. I mean, I guess I'm coming at this with there's a raft of movies I love. There's a raft of movies I don't love, and I would say are bad. And there's probably like a big blob in the middle that you can watch without them being offensively bad, but you're not going to get a lot out of them.
no.
So Wicker Man. Speaking of horror movies, when was your first Wicker Man experience? Like, when did you first see it?
I only became
By
aware.
the way, I don't need your day and date. I'm not going to like test you on this afterwards. I kind of mean roughly.
Well, it was whenever League of Gentlemen came out.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the BBC series, because they were just everywhere because that thing was massive.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I remember that was all three of them. So they were just sort of describing how they got together, and they were saying it was through a love of like British horror films, all the Hammer stuff. And then all three of them were like, "Oh, and The Wicker Man, that is our number one all-time favorite horror film. Like, we absolutely adore that." And there's loads of bits in League of Gentlemen that are straight out of Wicker Man.
I was going to say, you can see it, can't you?
Oh, yeah.
Whichever way round you come at it, once you've seen The Wicker Man, you can't not see where League of Gentlemen, and again, lovingly did it. I think that's the nice thing, isn't it? Like, we're not talking like rip-off, we're talking about absolute pure fans going, we love this about this movie, let's bring that into our comedy show, and an amazing comedy show as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, absolutely brilliant. So, yeah, curiosity was piqued, and like, I bought a copy of the DVD, and then it was like, fucking hell, man, this is actually pretty good. And yeah, it's just one of the ones where you're like, I think I'll put that on again.
Yeah,
have a little watch of that. So yeah, it's always enjoyable. Always.
See, I watched it on telly. Can I tell you when I watched it on telly? No, but it was a long time ago. It was a long time ago. When I grew up, Hammer House horror stuff was often on TV, and so I don't think it would have been far outside of that. But I want to say kind of maybe like late 80s. I was probably technically too young to watch it, but my parents were really cool with that stuff. They just went. I had an older brother, so we were just like, if he's going to watch it, we might as well. The truth of it is, in anything we cover in here, if I was way too young to watch it, the chances are my dad wanted to watch it, knew he had to look after us, and we just went bollocks to it. We're watching it, so I want to watch it. But yeah, so I come to it really early on in life, and like we'll get into it a little bit more. But I think certainly kind of revisiting it over the years, one of the things of having such a passage of time with it makes me realize kind of how timeless the movie is, but also I see how my opinions on the movie changes over that time, like from the impressionable youngster who probably saw a movie and thought this is what it's all about, or this is what it means to me, very, very different to when I watch it now.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think maybe because of the kind of the tropes and the mood that a lot of the Hammer films set up. I think over another British horror film from the same time, you'd be forgiven for thinking it will have that kind of amdram quality to it, but it's so massively different.
Well, I think weirdly enough, one of the reasons why I probably watched it, one, because you didn't have many channels back then, so you watched what was on, but it was, you said, like the links to Hammer House Horror, it has Christopher Lee in it. So I probably saw Christopher Lee in like the TV times, radio times, whatever channel it was on. And I probably saw Edward Woodward, who at the time was the Equalizer.
Yeah.
So I remember it was around that time. So kind of, I probably stupidly, because I was a stupid kid, went into this thinking this is going to be the Equalizer versus Dracula.
Can you imagine?
Kind of wasn't, but it was still really good. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing the Equalizer versus Dracula. I think that would be a wicked film.
The Lee thing, my mum has said that like Christopher Lee as Dracula, like when she was little, absolutely scared the bejesus out of her. And I don't know whether that was from that moment on, she couldn't even face the possibility of a Hammer horror film. So I just do not recall them being on TV in the background. Having an older brother of like 8-9 years, he was never into his Hammer horror or something that had just kind of like just passed our household by. Whether that's because Dracula scared me mother, I don't know.
I was going to say, is it a tactic you've used later on in life? So say if you guys are coming round and you don't want it to, you go, well, we're watching a Dracula marathon.
Man.
So yeah, use that.
I just prop a cardboard cutout of him out in the window.
Waving. That would be amazing. Yeah, like that bit in Home Alone. Along the party, you just got loads of Draculas all over the house. Make that a reality. That would be great. And again, that kind of like origin story of when you find things sometimes can be very impactful, can't it? Like, you're probably a lot more forgiving the younger you are. And that's why sometimes, again, when you revisit them later in life, those things that you swore to yourself are amazing, you revisit them 10, even 20 years later, and you kind of go, oh my God. Yeah. What was I thinking? But I mean, like, as a very good starting point for this, I would say that any rewatch I've done over the years, including rewatches to talk about it today, I actually think I enjoy it more now than I even did then. I loved it back then.
Definitely.
I think my love for the movie grows almost exponentially every time I watch it.
Definitely, it is a fucking awesome little film.
Well, and like I guess we're not bearing the lead here. One of the reasons why we picked it is I'd sort of said about like doing this, and I sort of said like, what horror movies do you like? And you kind of went for 3. We won't say what they are because we'll come back to those ones. But the minute I saw this one at the front end of the list, I was like, yes, please. Because I think the truth of it is that it probably doesn't get the love that it deserves. Now, I do think it's very highly regarded by critics. I think it does have a good fan base and a good fan base that really love it. You never hear it talked about in that kind of pantheon of horror movies, do you? And I guess we'll get into a minute ago of is it horror, isn't it a horror, which I think it is. But, it doesn't, when people are rolling out Exorcist, Halloween, like Nightmare on Elm Street and things like that, you don't often hear the Wicker Man bandied about in that, and it's a real shame for me because I think it should be. I think it should be watched by all horror fans and revered by horror fans. I think
definitely. I think maybe part of it, as well as like the kind of British uniqueness of it, that kind of does stray over into it just being weird, and like having the kind of the opposing views that are in this film, which is, as certainly from what I took from it on this rewatch, got a lot more out of it from the last one. I think that kind of weird is so disjointed, even from something like The Exorcist, which was out at the same time, because everyone's always banging on about Catholicism and like all of that sort of religion. It was ingrained. Everyone had a point of reference for it. So to have a demon like Satan, I think that is what blew that up. But because the protagonists in this not as bombastic and just, I think that might have made it suffer a little bit.
You look at The Exorcist and you've got like almost that battle of Christ versus the devil, or as you say, Catholicism against Satanism, Satan, the demon, the devil himself, good versus evil. And it's not as clear cut, is it, in The Wicker Man? Like, it's not good versus evil. It's kind of ethos. It's ethos against ethos, isn't it?
Yeah.
And admittedly,
sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say it kind of culminates in not the nicest things, but ultimately it is just 2 different ways of looking at life. I guess we should probably do a bit of a plot synopsis.
I mean, it's very, very short.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and just right from the get-go, loving the acknowledgement that they give for allowing Lord SummerIsle, or him giving the camera crew permission to film on their little island. So essentially, SummerIsle is way north, like, I don't know where it's supposed to be in Scotland, like out of Hebrides or in the middle of the Atlantic.
I'm sure I read somewhere along the line what it was, but it's gone. But a remote Scots island, isn't it? Yeah.
A policeman needs a plane to get to an island, so it's quite isolated. And essentially, he's a young sergeant, and he's been sent to SummerIsle to investigate the disappearance of a young girl. and that's pretty much it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think at your base core, it's not something that you haven't probably heard of or seen in many other things, isn't it? Like Stranger in a Strange Land,
Yep.
go in there to solve a crime under mysterious circumstances. In and I guess probably more traditionally, you would if this was a crime one, like there would be a murderer, say, or a kidnapper, but they'd be going there and they'd be working with the locals and speaking to all of them. But it kind of isn't that here, is it?
No.
You realise very quickly. I mean, it's if you haven't seen it, I think one of the things that is equatable to in a horror mode is almost from the minute he gets there. It's like that bit in American Werewolf in London where
Mm-hmm.
first goes into the pub and everyone kind of looks around because
Yeah.
he is a stranger.
Yep.
And
The second he turns up, everyone, he
yeah.
is focal point for everything.
Well, and as you say, you have to get a seaplane to get there, and it's not an island for strangers. You get
No.
the feeling very, very quickly and throughout it of going, the only people who are ever here, the people who live here, have lived here forever, or their families have lived there forever, and everything that is their world is contained in this island. And there, all of a sudden, you have, albeit like ostensibly at first, a well-being police officer who is coming to investigate the disappearance of a young child, and you can almost lean into that and go, who doesn't want that? Well.
Yeah.
It seems quite apparent from his early investigations that no one does, or what is actually kind of leaning into is even a lack of acknowledgement that a young girl either exists or is even missing. There's a lot of mystery around this, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
you will often see photos that are missing and things like that, and if people do acknowledge she's there, they kind of go, "Oh, they don't go, she's missing," do they? Like no one on that island is saying, "Yes, Sergeant Howie, please find this girl because bad stuff's happening."
Yeah, and it's not something like now. If an M. Night Shyamalan film, the fact that the townsfolk are lying, that would be the last thing that's revealed. With this, it kind of gets you all in the first bit, but you really don't have to wait for long to get a resolution to that. And it's like you're saying, the whole thing about turning around because he's the loner on the island or the new person on that island. It's like couple that just with the geographic isolation.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're in the middle of nowhere, you're on a bloody plane to get there, and it's like immediate resistance from like the occupants, the people on the island. It is just, but it's not aggressive, but it is
that's
just
exactly
nonchalant. Just no
that's
one,
exactly
no
what
one
I was going to
cares.
say. It's perfectly pleasant, but they're not interested, are they?
No.
Like so it's not like they've got the pitchforks out and they're running them off, or anyone's going, "You shouldn't be here," or they make it clear that he is a stranger. They make it clear he's not one of them, but it's all done with a smile on the face, and I'm sure we'll pick up later with a song in the heart. It is, and you said it earlier before. I guess we did the synopsis of going. This is very British, isn't it? And I think folk horror quite often. And I know there's folk stories everywhere, but more often than not, a lot of the times they are filmed in and around the UK because it will lean into like paganism and a lot of the folk traditions around harvest festivals and things like that.
Don't forget the class system as well, though.
Yeah.
Like to these islanders, Howie is an upper class gentleman who, at the very behest of the social standard, especially in the 70s, he would fully expect people to be yes sir, no sir, like cap in hand, and just generally you're almost compelled to do and say what this person wants and what they're after because they're better than you given their standing. Yet with him, it's just like, nah, I don't recognise her. And then they're all smirking amongst themselves, just like completely disrespecting and just ignoring him. Like, it just means nothing.
I think there really is something in that because, I mean, personally, I said about that jump from probably me back then to me now, and probably that jump happened with her. He isn't very likable and relatable to me early doors. And to a large part, I think it's because of that, because he's the authority figure, isn't he?
Yes.
And he is. So we talk about stranger in a strange land. So, young me probably went, well, he's a copper, isn't he? Like, the police are the authority. Why aren't they helping him? Whereas now I kind of go, he is someone who is insinuating himself into their community and is trying to act and behave in the way that he has been taught to act and behave, and in a very authoritarian way. And yeah, to a large degree, I look at it now and I go, piss off, Howie, get an attitude change. Like, maybe if you'd have gone in there and tried to work with these people and integrate with them, you might have had better success than portraying yourself as better than them, which is part of the feeling I get from it now. But I would say didn't back then. I think that has been a jump for me of Howie coming across a bit more of an officious prick than I think I noticed when I used to watch it a long time ago.
Yeah, sure, man. The all-seeing eye is on the boat.
Yeah.
And then, again, that's as he starts walking off into town on his merry little way. Already, who's this girl? She's Rowan Morrison. Oh, I don't know her. Don't know her. There's no Morrisons on the island. Oh, yeah, they run the post office. Have they got a daughter? Yeah, they got a daughter. Yeah. Like, they're just sort of just tugging him around, really. And it's just, they're not trying to hide anything. There's nothing. No. Nothing is being hidden. It's just he's not being told what it is.
Yeah, they're kind of going, oh, we are, rather than hiding or trying to sort of push the mystery, they're just going, we'll mete out the information at our own speed, thank you very much, because you are not one of us. So why would we tell you everything? Like, I mean, as much as Howie comes across as I say, a bit of a prick at this point, I must admit, if I was Howie, I'd probably be really annoyed. I'd be like, why didn't you just tell me that?
Yeah.
Why didn't you tell me that it's just up the road? We talk about what, and we'll pick up on some other stuff, but like kind of what makes this horror, and I think like for me these are horror tropes that are used in other ones, but used so effective here, and it is that isolation that Howie must be feeling, and I've said it a few times, the stranger in a strange land. Like this is where the discomfort and the horror comes for me, of going, what if I was dropped into the middle of a situation and I don't know anyone around me. I don't know how to act. I don't know how they're going to react to me. And I think that's something that kind of resonates with me as a viewer, of going, oh God, yeah, that'd be horrible, isolated. Whereas on the other side, I also see of I am one of that community, and someone's trying to insinuate themselves on it and push their way into our way of life. And yeah, I think it's a great balance for a horror element for me.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot more frustration in the film as it builds, and I think for me the horror was the ending, because so much comes together. I'm not going to go on about it now.
That tips it over the edge.
Yeah, that's the thing where it's just like, fucking hell, sort of thing. And then that whole, you can look back on the film and then you can all just see it for what it is. But yeah, just the general frustration, uncomfortableness, really, just being, he's not amongst people he knows, and he finds that out very, very quickly.
And arguably, he's just a fella trying to do his job, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like, he's been told go there. And as I say, questionable, I think, some ways in how he tries to do it. And I think he could help himself. But yes, he's going, this is my job. And also, I talk about the efficiencies of this, but from him and from the laws of the country that he is in, which this island is part of that country, whether it likes it or not, he has authority. But of course, he's been sent somewhere where they don't recognise that authority. Poor old Howie. If he was the equaliser, he'd have just done them all in seconds, I imagine. Like
that first old boy for not coming to row out to him right away. Kneecapped him.
Yeah.
One in the elbow. You'll never row again, son.
So as much as they've kind of landed it and they're seeing this, I think one of the things that is apparent very early, we said about that kind of isolation, is how much a character the place is. Like SummerIsle is as important in this as any of the actors, I think, and any of the storyline and the premises. Maybe because of, and I didn't grow up on an island like this, but I certainly do remember in my early ages, some of the shops kind of looking like this, not selling the stuff that some of these were selling. So there's that bit of familiarity for me as a UK resident. But yeah, I just think it's a fantastic look to it, which expands out as we get to see what is really happening on the island.
I mean,
but yeah, so many great places. I don't want to jump ahead too much, but the sweet shop.
Yeah.
You know, it's an amazing set piece. The set designers on that and the concept behind that of framing something that any kid, arguably kids shouldn't be watching it, but any kid watching it would go, I like a sweet shop, and it looks like a sweet shop, but it doesn't have any branded sweets or anything like that. It's kind of all home designed, and you know, like
well, it's all of the sort of kind of the harvest traditional stuff, isn't it? It's probably like I didn't look into it, but I'm like the hair must have something of massive like importance to pagan rituals. Probably is like the coming of summer, like the change of seasons. Like they start having lariats and stuff like that. So if they're having a new kid, then
you look at the Christian adoption of Easter.
Oh yeah, this is on my list, Michael.
Oh, sorry. But I was going to say like that kind of taking the time period and plugging yours in, and I think you know, like what do we now kind of associate a lot? Like most kids, they associate Easter bunnies, chocolate bunnies, and things like that. But of course, again, probably driven from pagan of the chocolate hair or the hair as a gift that you would give at that time.
I think that the hair would be because the woman in the churchyard, she's holding the egg as she's breastfeeding, isn't she?
Yeah.
And there's a hair on the altar, so that probably goes back to that. And like you say, with when the Romans converted to Christianity, like the whole empire, the easiest thing to do was just to graft their holidays onto existing, because most ancient cultures, it's going to be an equinox, it's going to be spring, summer, winter. You know, there's not.
They're gonna hedge things at those things where things naturally change in the world, aren't they?
No matter where you drop a pin in an atlas, they'll all be having that. So as the leading empire, then like whatever Samhain becomes Halloween, just becomes an autumn festival for the onset of winter. So that's kind of what makes it again a bit spooky, because we all know that in our subconscious it's like it's just a bit different to what it should be.
Well, and like one of the where time scale we are, and I think there's a question about like what year this is set in. I mean, I always interpret it as this is happening in the 70s, but I think actually, weirdly enough, other than like Howie, who probably ages it to a degree by him being a copper and the sort of technology that's there, effectively when you're on that island, you could be at any time, couldn't you? You could be like sort of, well, now I was going to say 70 years in the past, but then you could be like about 120 years ago now, but about 50 years in the past, or it could be the future on the island, because it doesn't matter. Like they're not changing, their ways aren't changing, they're doing their thing. But in the calendar, we are coming up to May Day, aren't we? And you know, like there's lots of stuff around the harvest. So I think of it as a kid growing up, like having like the harvest festival at school and stuff like that. Again, all adoptions of things that would have come from pagan beliefs at the time.
Yeah, definitely. Just, you know, people need a religion.
Yeah, and I mean, on SummerIsle, I mean, when I was at school, they'd say bring like a can of sweet corn in, whereas it'd be a foreskin in a jar on this island. So it's slightly different, but you know,
that wasn't a small jar, was it?
No, that was a lot. I mean, like, and I looked around that island and I thought, wowzers! Like, this has got to be a long time they've been collecting these.
One of them's my great grandfathers.
But yeah, I mean that kind of leaning into what could have been and what should have been, because one of the other things that really struck out to me about, if there is a message in there, and I don't actually think this takes sides. I don't think there is a kind of I'm definitively on this side, but it's one of the bits where Howie notices the desecration of churches.
Mm-hmm.
And is appalled by the desecration of churches. But it's such an interesting thing, because it is effectively what was done to pagan churches by Christianity. And you kind of go, well, actually, like, it's almost gives these backsies at this point, isn't it? It's going, well, you know, like, this is our island. We've adopted this way. So we're just doing to your church what you would have done to my church.
I think that the writer digs in more at Catholicism than he does like paganism. I think just how paganism is laid out in this is just so matter of fact that, you know, it's juxtaposed with the stuff that he uses from Catholicism, and I think he's just digging it a bit. I think he's maybe showing flaws in Catholicism. He's certainly holding a mirror up to it, because obviously we don't want to really scoot past the pub scene with the overdubbed
Sorry,
excellence, because that's awesome. And then the whole general pub thing, but obviously, you know, he goes upstairs and she's got to start to entice him, hasn't she? She's got to see if she can lure him out of his bedroom in the night. And while she's jumping around and banging on the wall and singing to him to try and come and see her, like, they intersperse that with mass, I believe it is, with the wafer and the wine. And at that point, you kind of, as I remember the first time I was watching it, I was like, fucking hell, what is she doing? What is she? And there's an embarrassment sort of from that, oh, Jesus. And then it's like, you know, oh, boobs, that's a little bit more interesting. But it really is, for an audience of the time, they would have been like, oh my God, what is she doing? But then they intercut that with mass. And he's that whole transubstantiation thing about taking the wafer, and one of the core Catholic beliefs is that turns into the body of Christ upon consumption, and then the wine, and that turns into the blood of Christ upon consumption. And it's like, that's quite mad when you think about it. Like, you believe in that things are taken on a different form, and that's a real big one for Catholicism. And well, when Pat Mills read V for Vendetta, it was that scene where the bishop obviously meets V when Evie's dressed up as a little, like, pink schoolgirl type thing, isn't she? And she's sent in to lure the bishop out. And when Pat Mills read that script, he was blown away, because V had forced him to eat the wafer, and then when they'd done the autopsy, the wafer was still in his stomach, so it hadn't transformed into the body of Christ. And that was just such a huge thing to be like, well, there you go, he doesn't even believe in this is all just, he's just an evil priest. And I think with this, it's like, well, there you go, you both got your absolute Looney Tunes belief systems going on there.
Well, and I think, again, young me, and I wouldn't say that young me was big into religion, it wasn't, but I guess I was more au fait with what sort of Christianity and things like that. I'd been dragged kicking and screaming to Sunday school until I pulled full Damien and pretended I was burning to get out of it. So I kind of had an understanding of that, and I grew up in a household like that. Whereas this was probably, other than like a little sort of touches and nods to it every now and again in some of the Hammer House stuff, this was my first experience of paganism and some of these concepts. And so I think, young me, when I first saw it, I think I was more like, they are weird because I understand that. And I think probably young me didn't, or certainly young me didn't pick up on kind of that as a concept of it going, we are showing by having this singular person who's probably more like you sitting at home watching it than the people on this island. We are going, look, all this stuff is odd. This isn't how you live your day to day. However, we are also going to, with scenes like this, and certainly with some of the stuff when he's having conversations with Christopher Lee later in the movie, where the absurdity of this traditional belief is pointed out. And then you kind of go, and again, watching it now and watching it in the interim years when I had a better understanding of the world, that's the, take out the love of it from a horror perspective or not, that's where the genius of this is for me, is you kind of go, and this is why I don't necessarily think it takes sides. I think for me, it's just saying these are two different belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
One is not more absurd than the other. They both have their absurdities, and potentially at home, pick one of these, but we're going to show you a lot more of the one that you don't get to see.
Yeah.
Because you'll get to see everything you ever want to see about Christianity, because that's ingrained in like all entertainment at this point. There's churches at the end of like every street and things like that.
Yeah.
You're not ever going to really get a working knowledge or an interest or even a curiosity about the pagan side of it unless things like this say this is how the other is. I mean, and to be honest, they get a bit of a winner because they sell it with boobs and sex, don't they? Which is, probably better than how Sunday school was sold to me. Was I had to go and sit in a room listening to some dude talk at me for an hour about stuff I wasn't really interested in.
Yeah, and you could have been sat at home watching cartoons. A killer.
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah, it was, wasn't it? What a terrible time to do it. Who would pick church to clash with great cartoons? What a terrible scheduling. You say about the pub, and I know, like, kind of we meander through this, not necessarily in the order that it is, but I think there's some standout moments, and you're right. There's a few set pieces in there, as you said, the sweet shop and things like that. But when we get to it's the Green Man, isn't it? And what an amazing signage!
Oh yeah,
Green
beautiful
Man.
sign.
But you go there, and this is, as I say, something that I think has been, that maybe we're more comfortable with, but has been ripped off like a billion times since. And I'm not saying this was the first time, but this using the local pub, a thing that a lot of people who will watch anything have been in a pub, possibly a local, but really, really hyped up to 11, isn't it? Like this is when they are. For sure. When Howie seems in this early part of the movie most out of his element, because the way that he's acted and a kind of pious nature, you think he probably wouldn't go into a pub and drink with locals anyway. He might go into a policeman's bar or something like that. But this isn't a comfort zone for him anyway. And to put that into a very, very strange setting with massively friendly locals to each other. Again, there's no one that's trying to. It's not like someone's trying to start a fight with him or anything like that. It is just they're almost alienating him by being so friendly. They're almost trying to kind of go, come in, join us, be one of us. And obviously he finds that bitterly uncomfortable.
Definitely. The bawdy song, just the general raucousness.
Yeah.
It's setting these Catholic heckles up, isn't it? It's doesn't want to, sexual thought. Obviously a song about the barmaid's daughter. He's not comfortable with that in the slightest.
And it's worth mentioning at this point, the landlord's daughter is Britt Eklund as well, isn't she?
Yes.
And like someone who was a bombshell back then, would still be considered one now. And I think she'd done at least one of the Bonds before this, hadn't she? I think. So I think she did 2 Bonds. But anyway, she was known, and then you kind of plonk her into a Scottish pub in the middle of nowhere, being the landlord's daughter, and she does stand out, doesn't she? Like,
yes,
most of the men in there are kind of at this stage like a little bit past it, crotchety old men, aren't they?
Weathered.
Yeah, and you've got like this, but and she is sold as kind of the buxom wench, but
yes,
as
definitely.
you say, the bawdy song. The bawdy song is pretty much about how everyone in town has had a go or can have a go on the landlord's daughter.
Yeah,
because
she'll put you right.
Good evening. Show the sergeant to his room, would you?
Much has been said of the strumpets of yore,
of wenches and bawdy house queens by the score. But I sing of the baggage that we all adore, the landlord's daughter.
Just so accommodating. She's friendly. She's nice. She's welcoming. And yeah, as you say, this is where we are really. We saw Howie being a fish out of water earlier, but this is where the island is really pushing on this now, isn't it? Mm-hmm. They are, again, almost killing with kindness, but they are going, these are our ways, don't be afraid by them, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And you can see his discomfort level, and that argument with his beliefs is really starting to take hold. And a belt with a tune.
The landlord's daughter.
Yeah. I hum it a lot. I don't sing it a lot because I think a lot of the lyrics would be frowned upon if I was singing it. Like, or if you're on a bus or a train and you start banging out the lyrics for that, people would give you some funny looks.
Yeah, you'd get removed from the bus.
Yeah,
cancelled. The whole caboodle.
Actually, yeah, I forgot. Get cancelled these days. I go, what? It's an old folk song.
It's just the landlord's daughter.
Well, and as you say, like we transition that discomfort level to, and again, another big scene with Howie and Britt Eklund is, as you say, would it's kind of a seduction song, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
when Howie is there in his very very bland pajamas,
Tiny,
getting ready
tiny
for bed.
bed.
Yeah. You see Britt Ekland, Starkers,
Mhm.
but she's on the other side, banging on the wall, singing a song of
Singing
seduction
to him,
him. Yeah,
lovely.
right. She is saying, "Come on in," like he doesn't, does he? Like
No.
you see the pangs of it, you see the fight, you see how tempted he is, but no, he can't be tempted into to the landlord's daughter, and I think that is because of his devoutness rather than his wariness after hearing a song about how everyone in town's had a go. But yeah,
But then it also, you know, part of the test of the islanders as well. They had a checklist they needed to complete, and that he needed to remain a virgin until married, and
yeah,
obviously had to be a serviceman of the king. So he's got the religious pressure and that general work pressure bearing down on him. That, you know, the stiff upper lipped sort of British gentleman, given that he's Scottish. Like you can't be going around doing that. It's not decent, and it's not the right thing to be doing.
And I mean, like knowing what's to come, cast it in a certain light. But I think when watching this for the first time, or when a lot of people watch this for the first time, I think again we go to sort of the traditions that we normally see in movies, and again, like normally your law enforcement officer, the person who's come to save the kid, is the hero, and he might meet a girl along the way who is possibly indoctrinated into that world, but they would ultimately become the love interest. So at this point, like I think it's fully believable that you could be sitting at home watching it and going, okay, like he's not given into the temptation here, but he will probably turn her to his ways, and they will run off at the end and live happily ever after. And again, I think it's great because it layers in some generic tropes. It layers in generic tropes all the way through it that it spins later on. So a big fan of this whole bit, and the reason why I jumped ahead to that is great song again, and this is, I want to kind of focus on that. There is this movie, as much as it's got a really deep message in the religion, and I think like asking the audience to actually think about their place in the world and how they do things, and considering other people's places in the world. And it has great horror elements. This could be a musical, couldn't it?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Really could. Like you could put this in. Go back to video shops or categories on a Netflix. You could stick this in musicals as easy as you could stick it in horror, as easy as you could stick it in drama or anything like that, couldn't you? Because the music is fantastic throughout.
Yeah, and again, it's of a time. A lot of those probably are based on your old songs. I mean, The Landlord's Daughter is essentially, it's got the same sort of canter and rhythm as a sea shanty. So they probably were hollering that as they were drawing in the nets, like years beforehand. And you're always going to have some folk band on an island, so you get that kind of twang, and with that verbal history, just songs are good, but just so unlike anything that Howie's probably used to, because not one of them mentions Jesus or
that's
God
the thing.
or anything.
He's probably more used to Sunday services, hymns, things like that, isn't he? Like or like God Save the Queen, because of what he does, and you know, like these songs of reverence rather than, and the reverence of a person or a system rather than what a lot of these lean into is humor and sex. Let's be honest. You know, like a lot of it is kind of about that the stuff that maybe you'd argue that would be put by people of his standing as more base, crass values rather than
sins, isn't it? Especially in Catholicism. So lust and drinking for like his temperament and, you know, anger and everything like that. these people are tripping off sins. He's already thinking he's racked them up. He's going to have to go straight to confessional when he gets back from SummerIsle anyway. So that's an element of the control of Catholicism, is sin and guilt, and we can see how we're already fully ingrained in that system. And he begging for forgiveness for the feelings that he had when Britt Ekland was rubbing her nipples on like the plasterboard on the other side. It's
and singing a great song.
yeah.
I mean, and again, you've got the temptation of Howie, I guess, to a degree, rather than the last temptation of Christ. It's the last temptation of Howie, isn't it? And this is very much kind of the hymn, isn't it? This is the we want to make sure that you are dedicated to remaining pure, and you really are dedicated to those beliefs you've got. But kind of jumping out of this is where we talked about the island being a character, but this is where what goes on the island becomes much more relevant and prevalent, I guess. And when I say that, I think if you went to maybe more Hammer House horror tropes, you'd be thinking, there's a dark, sinister secret. There'll be a cave somewhere. There'll be a statue of a devil somewhere, or there'll be a vampire. But no, like you start.
And everyone
to see...
on the island will be trying to stop him from getting there, apart from one or two who'll be trying to coerce that person to get into it.
Whereas what you see is pretty much what's going on most of the island, and what's going on is everyone's just banging, aren't they? Like, they are just like living their lives, hoping for the harvest, but openly like having sex with each other, full nudity all over the shop, and Howie doesn't like it. Like, and when I say doesn't like it, you can like. This is where Edward Woodward, I think, does some of his best acting in the movie. Is kind of he'll walk into a scene, he'll see what's going on, and he puts disgust on his face fantastically. Like you really do think that like him as a character is bitterly offended by what he's seeing.
Do you know, like, because it ramps up as the film goes on. Initially, it's like an unsaid word, and then it's a kind of an acknowledgement that that's a bit, that's a bit weird. That's set up in the shop, and then you get on to disgusting when he's talking about food, and then as it goes on, then they're called heathens, and it goes on, and I'm sure it's all the way up to like the worst. Well, no, it does. At the end, he's using a curse, isn't he? Essentially,
oh, God, yeah.
So that religious fervor and anger creeps up as it goes on, as more gets revealed.
And I wondered whether, not only does it kind of ramp up, probably because more gets revealed and he understands a little bit more, but I think probably it's that frustration of, because he's that singular voice, isn't he? He's the singular voice in his mind of reason. And again, jump back to earlier days me, I probably initially would have seen him as the singular voice of reason. Now, not so much. And I think the singular voice of reason probably gets more frustrated the less those people around him aren't listening. So he's saying stuff that he, as far as he's concerned, is absolute abject fact. Why aren't these fools, whatever terminology you want to use, why aren't they believing him? Why aren't they listening to him? Why are they doing these stupid things that only stupid people would do? And I do want to come back to that when we kind of get to not just the end of the movie, but the end, because it's one of the things that really did strike me about watching it again. And I'll leave it to the end, because it was possibly the most striking thing about my rewatch of it this time is the voice of reason, and who really is the voice of reason, and are any of us really the voice of reason? When you talk about the ramping up, of course, not long after this, we go to the school, and let's just say what is being taught in the school is very different to what I was taught in school. I will say that, but he just happens to, by accident or by chance, turn up where the lesson is very much about the phallic nature of a lot of the symbolism they have. The phallic nature of the maypole, and of course that is based in, that was what a lot of these things were designed to be, wasn't it? But,
fertility rites. It's it's spring going into summer. It's people without our level of technology and understanding of the world, just everything is a cycle. So again, when you go through those cycles in nature, what do you do when the weather gets worse and bitterly cold? You immediately start praying to whatever deities you've got to bring that along. So
and doing anything you can to try and make them want to do that for you. You know, like you want to please the gods, not anger the gods. Howie is suitably disgusted by the lesson, isn't he? Parts kind of his investigation to a degree to state his displeasure, but the core reason is he's gone to the school because there's a missing girl, and I think the idea is that like either the teacher, because teachers will be reasonable, or the other kids will tell him stuff about this. But yes, you know, like he like forcibly kind of rubs out the lesson, doesn't he? Now, admittedly, he replaces it with the girl's name to try and make that point. But I must admit, when I was watching it, I did think, is he going to rub all this out and then start putting a lesson up about sort of Christianity or Catholicism? Because it felt like the first kind of big step towards a breaking point for him. Because I think, you know, it's the corruption of youth at this point as well, isn't it? It's not just
his reaction when he goes to read the register.
Yes,
he's gone through the classroom. Do you know this girl? No.
Yeah.
Every man jack of them. No.
Yeah.
And the kind of, I think one of them might even be sniggering, the girl with the black hair, and then he goes over to the register and just there's her name. And at that point, then he just calls them all, strikes them all as liars.
Well, and there's an empty desk in there as well, isn't there? There's one desk that's empty, like so almost, and again almost taunting him.
Oh, definitely.
But I guess he doesn't. This is him realizing that, I think. Well, not total realization, but this is where I think he's starting to, as a character, kind of go, they're all against me here.
Yeah.
No one is going to help me here. No one wants me to solve this. And I think as an audience member as well, this is the point where you are suddenly buying into that this is an island-wide conspiracy that everyone's in on, whatever this is. And of course you go to that more traditional side of going, what we've seen in other stories, movies, whatever, is that somewhere on this island they've got this girl, and that actually because they've got a festival coming, is she going to be a sacrifice at the festival? And P.S. they're all in on it.
But in that normal scenario, there would be at least one person on that island who'll just be like, oh no, mister, you can't leave. Like, I know what's going on. You got to come with me. There would be one person who would be trying to get them to what he thinks is going to be the golden solution. But in this, it's like, even the kids are just lying at him. Everyone is.
But I mean, again, potentially on first watch though, I might have jumped to the conclusion of going, well, that would be Britt Eklund at a certain point. She will be the one who kind of, because as much as she tried to tempt him, she actually does like him, let's say, and I think that's where my mind would have gone to, or as you say, one of the kids, because often it would be one of the kids when it kind of
definitely
bad things are happening. And music again. The Maypole song. Oh, the Maypole song. Oh, what a tune!
In the woods there grew a tree, and a fine, fine tree was he. And on that tree there was a limb, and on that limb there was a branch, and on that branch there was a nest, and in that nest there was an egg, and in that egg there was a bird, and from that bird a feather came, and of that feather was a bed.
Dance to a song about boners.
yeah, and it's just and again, but I think from memory, I think most if not all of the songs are based specifically off one. So I think the guy who did the soundtrack listened to a ton of them and borrowed kind of music and some lyrics from here, there, and everywhere, and inspiration. But oh god, like I could listen to that song over and over again and be happy for the rest of my life.
It was the bug in the desk as well.
Oh god, yeah, totally forgot about the bug in the desk.
That was a lovely moment because that's just that's you, Howie. Like
Yeah.
again, you're getting shown something.
Yeah.
Like no one's hiding anything from
No.
it. They're just not telling you.
Well,
And then when the girl's like, "Oh, he only goes one way, tighter and tighter and tighter," and then he'll like strangle himself or pop his head off or something, and it's like, Howie, he's got one point of view, and he's just going one way, and clearly just being led by a tether to like an inexorable end, you know.
The hard thing about that is that like obviously now and after seeing the end of this, I think I pieced a lot of what was there together. But I think first time watching again, maybe it was an age thing. I don't think I got that.
Yeah.
I think first time I'm watching it, I thought that was kind of symbolism for they've got that girl captive somewhere. Like that, just that, and again, a bit of a taunt to kind of go, yep, tied up somewhere, you're not going to do it. So I think I went very simplistic with it. Whereas, of course, not only the end, but probably just being a bit smarter than the dumb kid I was. I'd like to think if I watched it again now, I would pick up on that. But yeah, as you say, the bug is Howie, and this is Howie kind of going round in a circle. He's going to get nowhere, but as you say, get wound up tighter and tighter and tighter. Oh God, I mean, this is the beauty of this. I mean, I know we said right early doors we love this. This film is fantastic because I think not only has it got a good story, and at base value, you just kind of go, this is a good and interesting story, but it is chock full of not only cracking songs, it looks great, but it has all of this symbolism. It has really interesting mechanics that run behind what that story can be.
Mm-hmm.
But these parts through it, all of this stuff is littered throughout it, and even if you don't notice it the first time, after you see it to its conclusion, you go back and watch it again. You go, oh my God, how did I not notice that? Or why did I not realise that first time round? Effectively, all the clues for what it is are there throughout the story. Nothing's a shock, is it?
No.
You said M. Night Shyamalan earlier. Like, I'm sure like there would be an argument of going like, let's say The Sixth Sense. Everything is layered in there. But this does it so well, doesn't it? Of going,
oh yeah.
The end doesn't feel like a twist. The end feels like you're going, oh my God, yes. And why didn't I see that before? Because I should have seen all that stuff leading up to this.
Yeah, but you know, it's not hidden in plain sight, is it? When you consider everything about the film, it's it's just like all there, and like everything, it's just all the stuff is just about fertility, isn't it? It's just about rebirth and regrowth. And then
and the rebirth and regrowth of humans, but the rebirth and regrowth of crops and all of those things that human beings do to survive and to be a kind of a fervent and relevant community. I think they were buying me into this way. I think I might just go to a Scottish island at this point because it doesn't seem so bad. Kind of like would like a better sweet shop. But other than that, I quite like it. It's quite nice.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, obviously, because when they come out of the school, he's not best pleased with the teacher, but she has that brilliant line, and again, it's that thing. Whereas, are they just sort of like showing how Catholicism and paganism is just as bonkers, or they're just as bonkers as one another, or is it more of a dig at Catholicism? Because he turns around and says to her about like the resurrection.
Yes.
Whereas she's talking about just rebirth through nature. Just you come back in the land and the trees, and she turns around and she was like rotten bodies are a great stumbling point for the children. Like when it's talking about just resurrection, like your body will rise up again, and it's like, well, that's nowhere. Well, no, not any as less bonkers as the idea of just coming back in trees and in the plants and stuff. So it's always that. Well, you say that, but then what about that?
Well, and like again, like the greatness of it for me is that interpretation. I think there's so much there that like there's valid interpretations whichever way you go. And as I say, all the way through it, I don't necessarily feel like it's an attack. I feel like it's a pointing out. I was going to say the truth, but pointing out the obvious of if you are going to attack someone else for the absurdity of what they believe in, have a look at yourself first and go, is there any absurdities in what you do? And I think it's done, for me, done fantastically well. Yeah, we'll get to it in a bit, because I know we're getting up to kind of like Lord SummerIsle.
Yeah.
But again, that's where it's somewhat done its most effective for me.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It is that kind of holding up a mirror to go, you judge me for my way of life, but actually, and my belief system, actually, is yours any better?
Mm-hmm.
And why is yours better? And why, great stuff.
Yep.
When I'm going to divert for a second, because I love to do this. It didn't do fantastically well when it came out, partially, I guess, because of its 18 certificate, partially because I think there was juggernauts out there, such as Exorcist, which was kind of more kind of thrust down the throat. But I do wonder whether partially that might have been one of the things that was restrictive for people, was that idea of kind of, you're having a pop at my religion.
Yeah,
and
I mean, could well be, because don't forget, this the same sort of era when they're banning films like Life of Brian.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, Life of Brian, it's not about Jesus, it's about Brian.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is just, they're not openly popping at the church that much in it. Whereas in this, I think but to have stuff like transubstantiation completely leveled against a pagan dance ritual and stuff like that, I think it's quite amazing that this slipped through, because I don't think, like, you couldn't have done a normal interaction between an established religion or just an atheist with this. You couldn't have an atheist Catholic battles and forwards like this, because like it's just not subtle. Whereas with this, because again, just because paganism is so weird, I think people just sort of can just it can just come across as weird, and it'll be easy to miss that mirror being held up. So I think that tenseness of the other probably allowed it to slip past the censors and any like kind of fundamentalist thinking at the time.
Well, and if the censors, I'm going to say, weren't paying enough attention, or maybe it didn't resonate with them. Like, again, I think there's an equal argument to go, they might not have picked up on it, because they wrote, well, as much as they had a pop at my religion, let's say they were Catholic, you show the pagans as the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they do. But I think that's potentially where they kind of went with it, wasn't it? Almost going, well, ultimately, you say, oh, God, our side's right, that side's wrong. And as I say, I don't think it does do that. But I think maybe that's what kind of got it to
and again, why it's such a good film, because you can watch it at a face level, but you really don't have to. You don't have to dig too much into it before you get a much richer story.
And like going back to something we said right at the beginning about, for me, that's what horror at its best does, is it has horror tropes, be it jump scares, be it whatever part of it is, but it allows you to really touch on personally life impacting or statuses, class systems, and all this sort of stuff through a very different lens, and a lens that gets you maybe unexpectedly thinking about questions that you wouldn't normally ask yourself. And there's not many other genres that I would say either do that, or you are going into it expecting to be posed those questions, so it's almost not so much of a surprise and exciting thing to go, oh, I hadn't thought
sci-fi
of
really. That's sci-fi is the only other genre that would do that, that can do that. So
so let's jump into and onto Christopher Lee. So we
my notes just say Lee is awesome.
Well, I mean, the thing is, after like SummerIsle has a Lord SummerIsle, and depending on which cut you watch, because there are lots of cuts of this movie.
I've got a director's cut and the normal theatrical one, and I think the director's cut, I think it has more stuff on the mainland as how he's getting ready
at the beginning. And I wouldn't sort of have a dig at that, because I think it's fine, but I quite like the
just drop it in.
Straight in.
Straight in.
There's an argument that says, seeing a bit more on the mainland could flesh out how different this is for him, but I don't think you need it. Like that, as I say, that strange bit comes through. And one of the cuts, you see SummerIsle earlier. In one of the cuts, you see Lord SummerIsle, and it's actually at the Green Man, and he brings after. I'm pretty sure it's after the temptation scene, or possibly before, but either way, he brings a young man to sleep with Britt Eklund.
Oh,
And
yes.
And
There's a lot of snails, isn't there?
Yeah. There's loads of
Yes,
snails. There's
yeah,
loads of
yeah,
snails
that's it.
populating scenes and stuff like that. But in the one that I watched, you don't see SummerIsle until Howie goes to goes directly to see him to have a discussion with him, and that's when you probably should know this from the casting and the fact that his name's in the cast. But Lord SummerIsle is played by Christopher Lee, and you're spot on. Lee is awesome in this.
Just brilliant.
Absolutely still scenes, and
But they are naked.
Naturally, it's much too dangerous to jump through the fire with your clothes on.
he's great anyway. You know, even sort of, well, I'd say even. I can't think of a time where he didn't stand out on screen, even if it wasn't the best script he was doing and things like that. He has a presence. But in this, like, I don't know, like, one of the things I really liked about it is, I guess up until this point, most of the stuff I'd seen him was be Dracula.
Yeah,
you know, like we said earlier, and in here,
he's warm, he's cordial, he's very talkative.
He's quite cool,
he's a happy soul. Yeah, you know, he's not like Father Christmas like levels jolly, but he just seems very content. He's again, maybe from that religion, he's fully assured of himself and his island, what has to be done. And
I thought of him as like rich, eccentric, and it'd be great fun down the boozer. That's kind of what he felt like to me, of going, here's someone you could hang out with. And yeah, okay, he might have slightly different beliefs than you, but he's going to be a cool night out. And as we see this like kind of nudity galore going in the garden and people jumping over fire pits, that you go, actually, it'd be really, really cool to hang out with, because apparently this is sort of stuff that goes on in his house.
Yep.
But yeah, he does. He has these discussions. In fact, he catches, doesn't he, Howie watching the young women through the window, and he questions him on it. Again, like, I think directly, well, at this point, I think we're very much directly of people on the island are starting to challenge him directly, to start to kind of go, oh, so are you buying into ours, or is your...
He's also starting to lose it as well, isn't he? Because... he, you know, it's when he turns around and he's just like, what that out there? Yeah. He's starting to, maybe because he's talking to a lord and he feels that he can now kind of unload a little bit. Like, he can't, the plebs of the islands don't have to hear it, but it's definitely, he's starting to waver. This is all just becoming like, why? Like, what is going on?
Well, and you say about that lord thing, we said about earlier about that kind of authority figure. And I think probably he was expecting to go to the lord's bit and go, well, all the people on this island are weird, but when I go here, something that I see lords and I know that kind of caste structure in my normal day life, this will be where normalcy happens. And of course it isn't. You know, this is exactly the same.
He has no touchstone on that island that is going to reassure him or support his theories and his beliefs in any way. And the whole while still not, Rowan's here. Oh yeah, no, she's died. And just constantly getting this double story. And I think once you realise he is truly just floating around out there on his own, then he starts to just quiver and break a little bit here.
Well, and he's got a purpose, doesn't he? Because as you say, like that they. We don't know, like, is Rowan alive, is Rowan dead, is Rowan alive, is Rowan dead, but there's a suggestion that she's dead and she's in a grave, and he's going there, isn't he, to ask whether whether they can exhume the body of Rowan so that he can, one, see whether she's in there or not, and two, I guess, assist in his investigations, although I imagine at that time there probably wasn't a lot of forensics that could be done. He's like... we said earlier, this is where a lot of the SummerIsle lines come in, where he is, because there's specifically one, isn't there, about oh god, I wish I'd written this down in my notes. I'll butcher it, but they talk about Jesus and him being the son of a virgin and a dead ghost, or no,
it was a son of a virgin impregnated by a ghost.
That's it. Yeah.
Which again, it's like the perfect just return, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because Howie's like, "Oh, is this like fertility and everything?" And then he's just straight away with, there you go.
And effectively, how do you argue that back? You know,
Yeah.
like your belief system is built off of this. And again, not to take sides, not to say it's wrong, but why would that be any more credible than
Yep.
anything that these guys and girls are doing? And yeah, as you say, he starts to the anger levels are up, and I think uncertainty's there, and he is unsure, I think, about his place in the world at this point. And I think he just wants off. Let's be honest. One of the things that's key here is he had to seaplane on. There isn't a way off.
No.
Now, I'm not saying he necessarily would have ran at this point, but I think he's so frustrated. I think he'd consider leaving, maybe to go back to the like if it was just up the road. I think he'd have gone home to try and get some normalcy, or probably gone to get some mates and said, "Come on, lads, you know, like I need you kind of down here." So yeah, he is fully isolated here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's obviously he gets permission to dig him up, doesn't he? But there's that the whole bit beforehand. I mean, like with Lee having that back to him about the impregnated by a ghost. Like he's then still quite happy. He's not mocking him. It's just put out there as a suggestion, and then he's like, "Oh, come walk with me." So they go off for a trot, don't they? Like around, and he does the kind of the James Bond reveal about the history of the place, and then how it's his granddad. So you get a kind of a little bit of science in there, but one bit made me chuckle. I don't know if it's an analogy or whether I was just sort of seeing something that wasn't there, but like as Lee is walking Howie around, Howie, even though he started to lose his temper and he's obviously feeling isolated, he is quite content to listen to like SummerIsle as he's strolling around his thing. And at one point, like Howie picks something from one of the trees and then starts eating it, and that's like, is this a kind of like Garden of Eden sort of thing?
Yeah, it's
like,
like the fruit of temptation.
He's partaking of the fruit, and SummerIsle's chatting to him and educating him, and not necessarily things that a Catholic should be listening to about the paganism and things like that. But for a moment, it's almost like how he is actually, okay, I'll give it a listen. And he seems content to listen rather than continuously heathens and rubbish and like he wasn't in the school.
And I wonder again, like we said it earlier, like is this because of his status? Is it because he's a lord? All of a sudden, he's more willing to listen to it, or is it that he is getting tempted by the thing that's been put in front of him? Or probably the truth is it's a bit of both, isn't it? I think he's getting tempted, but partially because it's a structural system of someone that he would generally see as someone to bow down to or to take orders from. He is saying this, that suddenly he gives it a lot more credence. I think one of the interesting things at this point as well is that when he's talking, when Lee's doing the villain-esque reveal of this is the origins of the island, and this is why we started doing the festivals, because we got bountiful harvests, and we need to continue that. Is almost that kind of admission that he doesn't necessarily 100% believe that that's the thing that causes it, but that it has worked. So
I don't know. I kind of got like full commitment from him on it. I don't think he was doubting his grandfather's ways or anything at that moment.
I felt like he was more kind of going, and not I say belief, that when he was having that conversation with Howie, I took it more that he was almost saying to Howie of going, come see, come sir, but it's worked for us, so why wouldn't we? And maybe that's why Howie bought into it a little bit more, because maybe he felt like he wasn't a zealot for it. He was just going, do
you think if he wasn't a full believer that the end would have happened though, or would he have bottled it?
So that's what I mean. I think he is a believer, but I think at this stage it's kind of him with Howie kind of going,
right, sorry,
me granddad, and it was the family way. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but like it's causing no one any harm, so why wouldn't we?
He said Victorian zeal, and that made me kind of chuckle, because you do get that. A lot of the characters that have sort of bled through to our age, about Victorian age, they're all fucking bonkers. Like, there's not an earl or a lord who didn't do something that was absolutely balmy, sink all of his money into something and end up destitute, or another one who made millions out on the like Pacific Ocean and stuff like that. It's just there is an element of craziness about the Victorian era, and being an eccentric where you'd be like, yeah, I can fully see your point there. It would just be like my bonkers granddad.
Well, and almost that we'll get to where it gets to in a minute, but kind of that stringing him along, because they don't want him to believe, do they? Ultimately, they're not trying to convince him. If anything, there's test after test after test to get him to prove that he will continue to think that his way is the right way and their way is the wrong way. But yeah, I thought in that kind of temptation thing, again, I just felt like there was a bit of a let's try a different technique with him, and let's almost kind of go, come on, you know.
Again, it's that checklist, isn't it? They're getting those 4 or 5 points that they need to fulfill, and as soon as just keep testing him and like, oh yeah, no, he's gone through that. It's like, oh, next one, and as he progresses, then
I mean,
he fills that list.
He's potentially unshakable, but as I say, I think at this point he was shaking and wobbling, and I think that's almost maybe how you get him back to the other side of kind of going, come on, is it so bad? What we're doing, is it so bad? P.S. You can dig up that dead child. And of course they do.
They do, and
but it isn't a dead child.
It's not. It's that pesky hair.
Yeah, and there had been mentioned, I think, by the younger sister at some point. Like, I think she'd made a claim that she didn't have a sister, or if she did, the sister was a hare.
Oh yeah, when she was doing the painting, she said, "Oh, because he was, where's Rowan?" And she's, "Oh, Rowan's the hare."
Yeah, and of course, then later on, as I say, they dig up the grave, and Harry finds a hare in there, and was the photo was in there as well, wasn't it? The photo, there'd been a missing photo.
No, he had printed it off. He'd broke into the
oh yes, that's it. Sorry,
pharmacy foreskin jar place, and he printed it off. And obviously, hers in the pub every year for the past 20 years. There's been a picture of a young girl in front of the altar, and there's just been abundant with the Harvest Festival, hasn't it? And then obviously gets to that year's one photograph missing off the wall. And then when Howie finds it, it is bare.
And traditional police detective work, doesn't it? And I think one of the things I wanted to kind of pick up on here, and it was really, I didn't know this, but when I was kind of like looking into some of the stuff around it, the writer, or the screenplay writer, because it is actually based off a book, isn't it? But the screenplay writer, for Anthony Schaefer, and I must admit, I'd never ever noticed this before until this time, that it actually says Anthony Schaefer's The Wicker Man. And I think it's the first time I've ever seen the screenplay writer get the credit rather than the director.
Okay. Yeah.
But he adapted loads of the Agatha Christie's. So he adapted Death on the Nile, Murder on the Orient Express, all around that time as well. And I think it really is a testament to it. Is this to large parts feels like a police procedural of the time as well, doesn't it? It kind of gets that right. Like,
Howie noticed that himself and sent himself off on that own line of investigation. Whereas, like now, they'd have that scene where he walks into the pub and the camera would pan past the row of pictures, and then you might not even see that one was missing. But then at some point, an hour and a half down the road in like a new film, the girl who we suspected would be on the side of the policeman, would come up to him and say, "Oh, here's a missing picture," or "Have you ever noticed that picture?" And then suddenly the camera will go back to the wall and he'll be like, "Oh yes." So he'd have to be told, "Now you need to go in that direction." Whereas with this, just good old fashioned coppering, he's like, "Right, notice the photograph isn't there," and you're never like, "What the fuck's he doing there for?" It is just everything just naturally progresses the story forward.
And having those elements make you, again, I think it's a good trick to the audience to kind of go, okay, I'm comfortable again now, because I've seen loads of cop shows before or movies, and he started to find the clues. So he is going to piece all this together now, and he is going to find the girl, save the girl, stop the bad person. And again, I love it, because probably first time watching me was going, oh yeah, I'm back in my comfort zone. I know where this is going, and it doesn't. But again, we'll get to it. It doesn't. But that's we talk about the greatness of it. The greatness of it is that it leans into tropes when it wants to. It leans into it for a purpose, because it's trying to get you to decide what's going to happen next because you've seen it done like that before.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't quite happen how you expect it to happen next.
Yeah. I mean, all along the way, you're presented with something that you think is one thing, and then it's been flipped into something completely else, completely different. So, you know, it's right up until post things at the ceremony. It's sort of like, oh, cool. Now this is going to happen. It's like, nah, no.
Yeah.
And that is a good subversion of expectation.
Yeah.
And someone should like send a copy of this to like old mate you done Last Jedi and
to be
J.J.
fair,
Abrams. This is what you do with a subvert an expectation.
I think they should probably make most people before they make a movie watch a movie would be a nice start. But watch this movie would be a lovely start. Mentioning the seaplane, you know, he does, doesn't he? He does go. He can't fly a seaplane, but he kind of goes to radio, doesn't he? But the seaplane is damaged, the radio is damaged, and I guess that's our last step of you are 100 million% isolated here now. You are here. You are feeling the impending danger of being a singular entity amongst this community that isn't doing things the way you want it, and you still want to save the girl.
Yeah, because I say it
holding on to that.
Getting out to that plane, like radio's dead, can't start the plane. Like at that moment, probably nowadays, that character, like the walls would start to close on them, and they'd start to ramp up their panic. For Howie, I think this spurs him on. This is his sort of religious zeal a bit. He's been tested to his absolute breaking point, probably not complete emotional breakdown, but just what he'll tolerate is just being a little bit rude about people not talking to him. So off the back of this, he's like, well, you know, if I can't go and get a load of people from the mainland, then I'll search it myself.
Yep. It's almost like it's singly down to me at this point.
He goes back to SummerIsle with the hair, doesn't he?
Yeah, and you get that kind of dramatic luzzing it into the room scene, don't you? That powerful scene. And again, the sort of scene that you would normally associate with the hero, isn't it? This is the hero's moment where they challenge the villain and they go, I know what you've done. Boof.
Yeah. And you have that bit where he because obviously SummerIsle, and I can't remember the teacher's name now, but they're singing another bawdy song to one another, aren't they? And again, sort of Howie is like, I hope you don't think that I can be made a fool of indefinitely. And again, there's sort of like a little bit of foreshadowing, another one on the checklist. It's like, they're fully aware, like, and you know, the beetle is creeping closer and closer around that nail at this point.
His staunch kind of belief in being right, but his pride is fast becoming his downfall, because his pride it's not only about saving an innocent child in his mind, but it is about teaching these people who he would have considered, I'm going to say, beneath him or lesser than him, like authority wise, and probably in IQ wise, brain power wise. I think like he would see these as kind of the yokels, but they continue to get one up on him. So I think his personality and his personality traits are just taking a battering over and over again. They are winning every step of this battle of wits, aren't they?
And it's quite interesting that they do this. Do they know that he's going to try and leave the island, or was that just a precaution? Because they do. It's at that meeting when he goes back to see them that, you know, we're talking about his ramping up about heathens and stuff like that. At that moment, he basically calls the island full of pagan brutality. He does call them, I think he might even say bloody heathens, and that's a point when bloody wouldn't even be on TV because it was a bit too racy a word to use. And
probably one of the reasons it got an 18 certificate.
Wouldn't surprise me.
A large contributor.
And then he pretty much tells this, like, Lord SummerIsle that he's going to be going back to the mainland and he's going to raise a full inquiry into this heathen island. And you know, what's another word for inquiry? It's inquisition. You got your pagan brutality, but then you're starting to echo your kind of your Christian not so goodness back in the day. And then again, it's like funny, you can't one regime can't accuse the other of brutality. It's that subtle little mirror that just I don't would have been picked up on in Life of Brian, but in this for some reason it can just
Yeah, it's
happily
kind of
sit
that,
just below the surface.
it's that when pushed, prodded, and challenged in anything, like obviously this one being religion, but when pushed, prodded, and challenged, how do we react? And sometimes we react in our worst way. And of course, we've got a history full of, when looking at any religion, of some of the worst ways people have reacted. So yeah, I think it's as you say, it's a great point to make in the movie of going, when pushed and pushed and pushed, you will do those things that you probably try to forget that has been done under the name of your God, whichever God you are supporting at that time.
So, like, spurred on by all this and now trapped on the island, and he goes about basically searching the whole place, doesn't he? He's then absolutely determined, like, Rowan is alive, she is on this island somewhere.
And again, in theory, it's not the world's biggest island, so in theory, it's searchable. But one person searching, like, I mean, a bit of probably a fruitless search, and probably shows his like how he has nothing else ready to do other than this. Because I mean, realistically, if she was in Cave A, they'd move it to Cave B. Then when he searched Cave, so I think it is really kind of laid on to go. He's at his, I don't say last wits, but he doesn't really have much in his locker from conventional policing, all the stuff we said about that layering on of all the traditional tropes that you might see in other ones. Often, as we say, once those clues start coming in other like crime ones, those clues would lead to that point, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But he's got all the clues now, and it's still not getting him to where he needs to be. So yeah, kind of policing has gone out. Traditional policing goes out the window at this point as well, because there's nothing else for him to do.
But then he obviously bumps into the hobby horse, and that kind of then draws him. Oh no, it is before, isn't it? The hobby horse part. So he's still walking around in his police get up, isn't he? And he sees that, and then he kind of gets drawn in. He's not so much following the hobby horse, whereas they're pulling him towards where they're having their little meeting. So then he gets to overhear the more specifics about the May Day festival and certain key points that are going to be occurring. So again,
our hero is learning the messages. To go, this is how I stop all of this. Yeah.
So then he takes himself off to a library to kind of brush up on it, and again, don't learn very much new information. Just egged on a bit more, and things just keep getting worse on the periphery. Like, are they hinting towards this? Is it the sacrifice element now comes into it? And
I think like
around one, hasn't it?
Well, I think as well, we look at the forget it's a movie for a minute. Let's just go into like kind of what the story's doing. It's almost probably on day one, you drop a copper onto an island and say there's a kid missing. They're probably not going to think sacrifice. Even at the end of day one, when everyone's a bit weird, they're not. But they had to. All of the stuff had to happen for him to start considering that actually this is it.
Yep.
It's not even so much that the kid has been kidnapped or the kid was killed in an accident or killed on purpose. But yeah, now his mind is starting to turn to going, no, they're all in on it because they may well be planning to sacrifice a child with their dirty, filthy, pagan, heathen god in his head. Yeah.
Just because the crops failed and they've all been eating tinned spuds and peaches for the best part of 10 months. And with that in mind, it's lunatics, heretics, maniacs. Yeah.
I mean, sentences that I use every day at work, but generally most people don't, do they? I just do it for kicks. And like he still resolutely wants to save Rowan, doesn't he? That's one of the things that he has remained unshakable about. He's not gone, well, the plane don't work, fuck it, I just want off this island, I'm going to find a boat somewhere and go.
Mm-hmm.
He does want to rescue the kid, like that kind of purity, to go back to kind of his virginal and pure ways again. That purity is still there. The protecting of the innocent.
Yeah, the chivalrous nature of being a policeman. And again, have to. That checklist is something about the king's business, isn't it? It's
yeah.
so yeah. Again, just by pushing in that little further, just keeps going around that nail, getting closer and closer and closer, and just oblivious, doesn't even know it when everything's there to show him.
Yeah, but I mean, but as I say, I think not only is he oblivious, but I think some of it. I mean, I guess as an audience, like the idea of sacrifice, you probably jump to it quicker because kind of it's a movie called The Wicker Man, and it's about that. But I think we're oblivious to some of that at certain points. I think it's deliberately done to, I said earlier, going with some traditional tropes that are really there to kind of lead us in a direction of where we think this movie's going to go, rather than probably the honest truth is it's going there instead.
Well, there's been nothing untoward, really, has there? You think about it, like the Islanders haven't done this. Not one of them attacks him. Not one of them is rude. I think the most negative reaction he gets is of the gravedigger, who just laughs at him every time he mentions the minister or the church. And he's laughing at him like it's absurd that he's mentioned a minister, not the concept of a church or anything. It's just like just completely no minister. So
I think probably sort of like if this was made 20, 25 years later, I think equally you might potentially be expected to be a totally different story. So like, as you say, they've done nothing wrong. So I think at this point, like with a more modern eye, you might be going, is he like, was there ever a kid? Is he just imagining this? Is this someone having a nervous breakdown and not being able to interact? But yeah, I wouldn't have expected that kind of at that point. I think that's kind of, again, storytelling tropes that come in quite a bit later. Oh, I've just remembered we're coming up to like my least favorite part of the movie, and it's it's the punch or fall costume.
Oh yeah.
So he takes out the landlord of the Green Man Inn, doesn't he, and steals his costume so that he can infiltrate the May Day celebrations, because he has at this point decided that there will be a sacrifice, so he needs to kind of get in there to be in front of it. Oh, this fucking costume's horrible. Like, we said earlier about what makes it horror. This costume alone is enough to make it horror for me. It's absolutely gross.
But the kind of the burnt punch face thing.
Yeah. But like they are going kind of full Mayday, so like everyone in town is in a costume, and I would say to a large part, from what I think of as the world, I would say very unsettling. Whereas again, if that is your world, you're probably going to go, yeah, look at all these cool costumes and things like this. But yeah, at the time, again, these were the leans into the big horror leans for me of going, oh my god, I am in the middle of all these people who are dressed really weird. So I've seen them that they act differently to me, but now they're kind of amped this up by they're all marching in one direction to go and do what I think is a sacrifice, and I feel so out of it here.
Behind Christopher Lee, who's up and down, dressed as a woman, right?
Yeah.
Not exactly RuPaul standards of dragon going on, but again, even back in the day, that would have been something. Your mother would have just said, and then he came out of the house wearing a dress, and it's that level of weirdness that would have been just so hard to process back then.
That stature being willing to do it as well, like, because as you say, these societal norms, and even like in the world of movie making, which is often quite progressive for things, isn't it? Like, this would have been a huge thing. I mean, like, God, I as I say, I do remember watching it with my dad. I can't remember how he reacted to it, but I see, of our time, I imagine this would be almost a shock. Like, this would be your twist or whatever.
But not based on facts. So it would have, maybe that even makes it even weirder, because it is something that people would have been doing. Like thousands of years ago.
And I'm sure there's some symbolism there about being part of this festival and maybe kind of leaning into as the let's say, the leader of the community, or certainly that, of going, well, okay, you maybe take the place, or in the parade you take the place of Mother Nature, or one of the pagan gods. But yes, it's when I watched it as a kid, again, I'm kind of doing this again. I know it's a May Day festival, but in my head I kept going Harvest Festival, Harvest Festival. I just remember thinking, it ain't like this at school. Like, we don't get to dress up like this. Like, this is a very different world that we live in. Oh God, I keep having visuals of that pissing punch costume.
Oh yeah, the worst and first clown, I suppose, figure.
Well, we so as the procession goes on, we then we build up to the
potential decapitation.
Yeah, the chop part of the movie, where as part of the festival is I think I can't remember if it's 5 or 6, but there's 5 or 6 people. They're kind of standing in a circle.
Yeah,
they
6.
interlock swords, and then people from the village have to go under, put their head up through the swords,
and at some random point they'll decide.
Yeah, it's almost like the world's most dangerous game of musical chairs or something like that, isn't it? Yeah, at some point the music's going to stop and they will chop someone's head off, and many people from the village are going through.
Chop, 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 chop.
And then Howie is picked. Now we say Howie is picked. In theory,
the barman.
No one knows. Yeah, or certainly the movie's portraying that they all think it's the barman.
Yeah.
And of course that adds, as the audience, because he is the hero, probably on first watch, that peril of going, do they know? Is something bad going to happen to the hero here? And he goes up and under and through, and he comes out the other side, doesn't he? Like he gets through it. But lo and behold, next one up, choppy, choppy, chop, chop, heads chopped off. And there's not much of a reaction from the village, but how he reacts, how, again, you expect someone to react of kind of that panic of someone has, but you quickly find out that no one's head's been chopped off. It's just a costume head, isn't it? And
that's
it's actually one of the
symbolism of it, isn't it? The animal. Was that
it's
the
one
animal
of the small
sacrifice?
children.
Yeah.
And one of the small children is inside the costume, and everyone has a good old laugh at that, but Howie doesn't, because Howie had thought that someone had been murdered, something that a police officer should be going against. I will say, in all of my life, as much as I've done things like musical chairs and some weird kind of games, look, I don't really know the origins of, it was my first experience and my only experience of the go through here, you might get your head chopped off. It's not something I then went to school on a Monday and went, come on lads, I've got a great game, let's do this.
No. Perhaps I'll only wheel it out once a year.
Yeah,
not
only
exactly,
on special occasions. Only if the crops are dry.
Then on a small island, you want as many players as you can have, really.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether there was a system to it. And when I say a system, I'm not trying to game the game here, but like
I should imagine there was. I reckon because she had like an animal head, didn't she? Sort of.
Yeah.
So whether it was a deer or I can't remember what the animal was now. So whether that was
now, it's deer or horse, one or two. But what I kind of more meant by that is, was this part of it, the chop purely fully putting Howie more on edge?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Or is it? Or do they do it every year anyway, just for larks? And they don't intend to kill anyone, but it's just like a fun song. Because again, we get a song through this bit, don't we? But yeah, I just wonder whether it is something that's part of any known rituals, or whether
it's been hinted at, hasn't it, by Lord SummerIsle. Then he's gone to the library and he's read the book, and then it's sort of like, the procession with the leader, man dressed as a woman, there'll be the hobby horse guiding everyone, and then he sees the 6 swordsmen. So as far as how he's concerned, it is like, oh my God, this is A, B, C, D is going to be a child sacrifice.
This is happening. All that stuff that my worst fears are going to happen in front of me. If I, as the hero, don't save the day.
Again, it's that bug on the rope. He's just got one direction to go in, and there's absolutely nothing that he can do, knowingly or unknowingly, to steer him away from that. he's been doomed since he landed on the island. That's just
Yeah.
that's it, unfortunately.
And I think at this point, like as an audience member, you are coming round to that, aren't you? You're coming
It's
round
more
to
unsettling because it's just like,
Yeah.
what is going on?
yeah, you're coming round to that kind of total manipulation of him, and that there's more to this. He isn't only just there to be the hero and save a kid. They wanted him here. Everything they're doing is manipulating him into something.
Yeah.
But I guess we're just not quite there yet as to what that something is, because we get, which I believe is one of your least favourite moments of the movie, coming up very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's I don't know, but like 70s films, all I don't know whether it was the sort of first half of the 70s, middles or later 70s, but you put on a soundtrack from that era and you know immediately that that's going to be a chase scene or just a bad like car driving scene, and it's just that really scatty, twangy, fuzzy guitar. It just, considering what we've had so far in the film, maybe the kind of the mechanics of music and human reaction to visuals wasn't quite so pinpoint accurate that it is nowadays. Like they know the notes and tempos and all sorts. That's, I don't know, maybe the frantic nature of the guitar is supposed to sort of reflect Howie's mood and a desperation, but I just found it a bit jarring. I didn't as a piece of music.
His kind of this is effectively the chase scene, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah,
but not the chase scene. Like he's actually
just having a splash around.
Well, you know, he's there. This is the bit where we find Rowan.
Yeah,
and you know, he's running with Rowan because he's doing what the hero does now. The hero has found the prize.
The flying up the stairs chin of the fella. It's the biggest bit of action in the film.
But I do agree with you. And I think the music was put in there because, again, you're looking at the opposites, the juxtaposition of what we're getting. So the whole time we've been on the island, all of the music has been the island music, the sort of stuff that they will. Whereas now, this is Howie's moment of triumph. He's found the girl, he's winning. So I guess I can see let's go with the music that heroes would be chasing or chased to in other movies. But yeah, I'm with you. It weirdly stuck out like a sore thumb, though.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure they made a big deal about the bands that done it. I can't remember who it was now.
But it didn't feel very Howie-like either, did it?
No.
You know, it might have felt 70s-like, a 70s hero, but he didn't feel like a 70s hero at this point. And as I say, I'm not entirely sure what I've played, but like, if anything, if you really wanted to show the difference, like, you would have, I think, something classical but rousing.
Yes.
Like, in there, because that feels more like, a hymn, like we were saying earlier. Maybe suddenly a hymn starts kind of playing over the top to build the drama and the tension. But I guess the drama and the tension of the scene is he's found the girl, but we know there's no way off the island. So what is he going to do?
Yeah, what's going to happen?
Yeah, and it's kind of like just running, really, isn't it? That's about the extent of his plan. Run until there's no more land left.
Are they going to find somewhere to hunker down? They're just going to hide? Like, no one knows he's there. As far as at least we don't know that no one knows. So yeah, he's like, what are you gonna do? Just keep running around in here until they find that little the way out.
Which I mean, effectively, you've been told there is no way out, is there? Like, he really is kind of, you know, he's succeeded on his hero's quest to a point, but there's no end point for this. But again, go back to movie tropes. What you would expect at this point, generally in a movie, is there's no way out, but he will find a way out. There might be a bit more peril, but you know, he'll find the hidden boat. He'll find that secret thing, or the islander that we thought earlier would come out and give him a clue will be the one who goes, "Oh, you know, I've rethought my ways. You are right.
Yeah,
we'll get you off, or I'll hide you, or something like that."
Yeah, please take my children to safety. And the second he's in the boat, bosh, they get one of the swords in the back of the head or something, and that would have been normally how it finished. Him sailing off with all the pagans all on the shore side.
Yeah. And you know, you could in a more traditional movie, end it there.
Yeah.
Probably leaving the audience going, well, he'll go back to the mainland. He'll get his copper friends. They'll come over. They'll arrest them all, and everything will be resolved in the way that our normal expectations would be. However, that doesn't happen, does it?
No.
Instead,
you did it beautifully.
Yeah. And you know, like they almost get to, this looks like a cliff, isn't it? But they get to effectively the end of the road.
Yeah.
And they are greeted by SummerIsle, and I think it's the teacher as well, isn't it? And
yeah, there's the teacher, the births, marriages, and deaths lady, and Britt Eklund, and the big unit fella. Yeah,
and as you say, we get the full reveal with the "You did it beautifully" because Rowan runs over to them.
Yeah.
Because
did they do it right?
Yeah, because at no point was Rowan ever at risk.
No, and of
Rowan
course at that moment you're kind of like, what? So you're fully sharing Howie's. What's going on?
And I think one of the things that would be for anyone like kind of watching this that hasn't seen it, I mean, God, like I'll probably put something up right at the beginning to say like it's spoilers galore, so like watch it before you do it. But I think one of the things, I think one of the things that worries me about it is that the end point has been done subsequently different ways, different times, hasn't it? So so maybe like an audience member now who's watching it might see some of this stuff coming way before I did first time round. But when I'm watching this first time round, this was the first movie I'd ever seen that did anything like this.
Completely.
And so that really helped it. But yes. So Howie is now coming to the realization, as we are as an audience, that we've said all the islanders were in on it. Well, actually, the truth is all of the islanders are in on it, inclusive of the child in peril all this time.
And you get, again, like we say about the previous Bond villain reveal, and obviously for this one, I think for this story, they, for the sake of the audience fully understanding, you know, they have to have this little moment where Lord SummerIsle was, you know, a child sacrifice can be good, but it's nowhere near as effective as the right kind of adult. And Howie is just sort of just utter confusion. And they run through the list about, you know, being a virgin, being in the king's service, like putting yourself willing to be king for a day. You had to willingly come to the island, didn't you? That's the only one I'm slightly dubious on, if I'm going to call into question any of them, because you can argue that he did willingly because it's part of his job and he wanted to. There is the anonymous letter, and I do somewhat question of going, but he wouldn't have gone there if not for that. So, but again, not anything I'm going to quibble too much on. But I haven't. It's been a long time since I've seen the director's cut, just because the footage, the additional footage, isn't the best. Some bits are really grainy and, you know, pretty much awful from what I can remember. But in that, I can't recall whether he, at the start, when there's more mainland stuff, was told not to go and he was like, oh, I'm going to go, or whether he was ordered to go. I mean, but he, regardless of, or whether there was a colleague who wanted to go, but he said, no, I'll go. So, you know, that's a small thing, I think, but clearly he has shown that he's there of his own free will and he wants to find Rowan. It's not that he's like a cop who's like, oh man, what they sent me out here for? I should be back on the mainland. He is fully invested in solving this thing.
Well, you say about the Bond reveal, as you say, like they're breaking down the list of things that they want a sacrifice to be, and he has shown, and as I say, like this is the point where I guess the revelation in the audience's mind, and probably like future watches strike this out even more. But this is the thing where you're kind of going, oh yeah. Okay, so that's why they were doing that. That's why they were trying to tempt him with that. You know, these were tests and things like that, and really, 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 really smart. And then they start to walk him up. And bearing in mind the title of this movie, and at no point in this movie have we mentioned a Wicker Man, have we?
No.
Well, there's a reason.
There is. Like everything is in the last moments of this film. It is, I suppose, there's your Chalamet like switch at the end, or the surprise thing. You know, just so many little small films thrived on that surprise element, that twist at the end, where you're just like, you know, fucking hell. And even though you say we knew, you know what's coming, it's there from the get go.
Yeah.
This film does not hide anything.
No.
So spoiler alert.
Yeah.
There may be a Wicker Man.
And they march him up to said Wicker Man. It's quite big, isn't it? But and inside it is layered with animals, all the stuff that was said in books, etc., 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 and in how he is put and sets it on fire.
But I feel like it's when they're leading him up there, his pleas,
Yeah,
like everything, and he starts off quite sensible, and you know, it's just, you can't be doing this, you can't do this, and then he gets
it's that kind of
hysterical.
it's kind of that incredulous thing that we would probably all feel, where because you'd be going, no way.
Yeah.
No way are they going to do this. Like, I guess at that point, you might even think, because you know the kid's alive, I guess you might even be convincing yourself of going, this was one big joke.
Yeah.
To laugh at my expense, because you're probably still not willing to accept the fact that these people are about to kill you.
Yeah. But
because,
they don't...
you know, go back to what you said earlier. All the way through this, they've been nice. They might have annoyed him, but no one's ever shown him any direct malicious intent at any point.
I think that loops back to what makes this so unsettling, because when they're leading him up to the thing, you know, he turns around like, you know, I'm willing to, you know, I'll die for Christ. And then Christopher Lee is like, SummerIsle is super happy, and he's like, then, you know, we have bestowed upon you a wonderful gift to die a martyr. Like,
I believe in the life eternal, as promised to us by our Lord Jesus Christ.
That is good, for believing what you do, we confer upon you a rare gift these days, a martyr's death.
As far as they're concerned, they're helping him, because he's now going to die a martyr and sit at the right hand of God. And in the whole thing, they're painting him up, and they're showing him love and reverence for his sacrifice.
Well, and effectively, he's really happy, isn't he? Because he's going to get what he wants out of his religion and his God in their head, and they're going to get what they want. Because they're going to have the bountiful, so everyone's a winner. Yeah,
apart from Howie, who I think, because of that, he at that moment he knows his doomed. He's like, there is no way I'm getting out of this, because I can't reason with these people, because it's a plus for them. Like it's everything. Their entire culture is wrapped up in this one moment that, because it's so alien to like the Catholic idea of it. He could not talk his way out of this if he wanted to. Nothing is going to save him at this moment, which, of course, goes on to even more sort of grander questions about, you know, your religion and your faith in the final moments.
So, like, I don't think at the time I first watched it, maybe, but this is also the last part, isn't it? When I say the last part, this is the last chance for it to do what a more traditional structure of again, if Howie really is the hero, this is a point where someone, be it the random islander or God even, would save him. And again, we said spoilers, even more spoilers. They don't. He gets set on fire, and you know he recites. I can't remember. He recites one of the songs, doesn't he?
Something like that, very impassioned.
Yeah, as they're kind of lighting it up, but no, like all of those animals and him are set on fire, and you get those really kind of haunting moments, don't you? Where you hear his absolute screams of anguish, but his screams. I mean, he's referencing of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and
but sure it's no longer Jesus Christ in reference, is it? It's kind of Jesus Christ in pain and suffering.
Yeah, because he's asking, like, as he's burning, he's praying to God, like, please don't leave me to suffer in hell. Please bring me. So even at that moment, I sort of got the impression that the film was still saying, because Howie's getting more and more desperate, and he's not. You know, I'm coming to you to be at the right hand. He's still pleading with God, because maybe he's just doubtful of that. And then you flick to the outside, and they're all holding hands and singing, big smiles on their faces. Like, it's just, who's content?
Yeah.
Who's,
That's the thing. I mean, you
know,
say he's reciting psalms, but as you say, the actual islanders, they're singing their songs, and not to be like reductive of it, but like, yes, this is nothing to them, is it? Like,
No.
in the same way as the sacrifice of an animal in there,
yeah,
the sacrifice of him is the same thing. You know,
Yeah.
it's just a means to an end rather than something with malicious intent.
and everything is good. Like,
Yeah, he
everything
needs
is
to-
good for them.
He needed to fit certain bills
Yeah.
to kind of get to that point, which they've shown he can. But this, it wasn't a targeted attack on him because they don't like him or anything like that.
No.
He is just a sacrifice in the same way as probably the goat that's in there or the pig that's in there
Yep.
isn't. They didn't go pick the meanest, shittiest pig who's horrible to everyone. They go pick the pig and put him in because we need to do that. And I mean this. I love the movie. Like they'll do that first. I love the movie. And I think that to a degree, possibly at certain points earlier on in my movie watching career, what the fuck am I saying? Movie watching kind of hobby. Sometimes I think probably because the end was so good, I think that carried it a long way in my mind. I would recommend it to people. Probably in my mind just based off of the end. But as I say, the more and more I've watched it, the more and more I realise that the whole thing is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
But I'm saying this purely because I do want to jump back to the end and say the end of this movie stayed with me for years.
Yeah.
This is one of the, and again, because it's the first time I'd seen anything like this done, I think it's probably realistically not a million miles away from this really being done for the first time in cinema. There'll be other kind of stuff out there, but for mainstream big releases with actors that are well known at the time, and I just think it's a phenomenal ending of a movie.
Yeah.
And you know, we talked about like kind of it being almost twist-esque. The thing is that I don't think it is a twist ending, because a twist ending is like in more modern sense is more, I don't know, got you.
Yeah.
Whereas this didn't feel like got you. When it happened, you just went, oh fuck, yeah. Everything makes sense now. And not that it didn't make sense before, but I see that like those bits that I was seeing that was happening, everything else was actually just kind of walking along next to it, and I wasn't noticing that at the time. I wasn't picking up on those story cues.
I think like the end of, you know, because the final shot is just the setting sun.
Yeah.
So it goes, pans up behind the Wicker Man. The Wicker Man, like how he's gone, he's been incinerated. The islanders are still singing, and then the Wicker Man falls over, but he's just been looking out over the sea towards the sun. And you know, the sun was the primordial god for nearly every civilization on the earth. It was. How could you not recognise that sun brought rain and crops grew, and that was your fertility right again? That was how your culture and civilization lasted. And you know, again, like we were saying with pagan rituals having Christian rituals grafted on top of them, like, you know, the son of God, the sun god. That's all that is really. And I think that, especially Howie being the Christian and the son being God, like, I think that they're both coming at it again from those different angles, but it's the sun. It's just indifferent. What does it care? What does it matter? It's just that face in the sky, and ultimately, you know, it's people coming at it from different ways have resulted in what you are revolted by as being like, fuck me, they just burned someone alive. But in a belief system, you know, it's just never attacking the pagans. It's just so unsettling because they're just so happy with it.
And a movie that spent so much time, and rightfully so. And I think this, like, the message that it's trying to get across is a good message to get across of going, this is, regardless of which side you support, which religion you support, or to a degree, modern thinking against old ways of thinking, you know, all that's in it. It doesn't necessarily even have to specifically be equating against religion, but for as daft as any of this might be to you, there are equally daft things. So yeah, to then culminate that and going, and we burnt him alive, you're kind of going, that doesn't feel so daft after you pointed out all of the daft stuff that are on the other side. Like, really, is that so different to some of the stuff we see now? arguably the fact that a human being is killed, maybe that's, well, I was going to say maybe that's crossing a line. I mean, effectively, lawfully, it's crossing a line, but maybe that's the bit where you go, oh yeah, that's a step too far. But you're still, again, juxtaposing it all the way through of going, but is it so far? Because we've said all the way through this thing here that you say is daft, here's something in your belief system that's exactly the same.
Yeah.
You know, like maybe like we should be more open to
But
this
then-
idea, or maybe less judgmental
Yeah.
to other ways of life.
And, you know, we've sort of been saying the whole time about you get one side of it from one lot and then the other side from another belief system. Yeah, madly different. But ultimately, doesn't that show a thread of commonality between different ideas?
Yeah.
The fact that, you know, like people will talk about so and so inventing the wheel, but then it's over here a few hundred years later. How did it get there? It's like, well,
Yeah.
I think for certain problems, the
We're
human
gonna get there.
mind, yeah, you're going to get there independently. There'll be some, like it's a famous thing. It's like Edison and Tesla. There's at certain points, certain ideas kind of formulate different geographical locations, but it's to do with the technology available that inevitably two people will reach that situation. So
it's almost a natural next step, isn't it? Of bit evolution, but in that case, technological evolution. So it's not totally incredulous to go, there might be 5 different people around the world who have kind of got to the point of going, that's our next step of solution. So they're all working on it, but they're working on it disparately. And they might deliver it at different times, but we kind of all get to that point.
So whether that's the kind of an ultimate thing about the film in itself, about how, look, people are just going to arrive at these weird systems themselves, and then ultimately the sun's just going to carry on going through the sky, completely indifferent to everything at the end.
And that's the key truth, isn't it? As you say, like there are certain, well, I guess the sun could explode, but let's go with we will rise and we will fall.
Mm-hmm.
And the sun, you know, you argue the sun rises and falls every day, but that is a constant. That's going to be a constant for our planet and any one of it, because basically when that goes, there is no planet.
Yeah.
So yeah, like what we do and our place in this is inconsequential compared to that. So that's why you can see people build their belief systems around it, the reverence, and of course, like, I mean, probably not touched on too much in this, but let's be honest, like if we're kind of touching the world of religion, I mean, a lot of the time, religions kind of form up because we're trying to find a place in the world.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to think that you've got one go at this. And actually, the consequences of us being here are pretty minimal. Whereas having that belief system, or having a belief system, allows you to feel more important while you're here, but have that theory that there might be something to go to when it's gone, which of course, you know, is what Howie, when he gets that point, is, you know, is will I go to God? Will I be in heaven? I want to be in heaven. And effectively, as I say, I think if you're going to, as mean as it may be, I love how I use the word mean on this, as mean as it may be to burn a human being to death, they have allowed
not the
him.
done thing.
I think they've allowed him in his belief system. So they're almost saying, I'm willing to accept that you really believe this, so we'll do it. They never pushed him to do something that would impact that, would they?
No.
Like, the terrible thing would be is if they had made him sleep with Brett Eklund and then burnt him, because then in theory, you know, like, you know,
Well, he wouldn't have been the right one, would he?
Yeah, but you know, like, and also then he wouldn't have got what he wanted, because then he would have had like sex outside of marriage, which you know, in modern day concepts, like, but in the like late 60s, early 70s, I know free love is starting to become a thing, but you know, still very much a judgmental religious system of going, oh no, you don't do that, you'll go to hell.
Yeah, for sure, man. And so he would have been racked with guilt from that. That would have been the end of him. He wouldn't have had that ultimate like martyr's life that he was hoping for, but he certainly wouldn't have had his seat at the side of God if he had been like unfaithful to his wife.
If he had been tempted in, do you reckon Brett Eklund would have sung their song while they were at it? Do you reckon she had that, here's my seduction song and here's our let's get it on song, like when they're actually going for it?
she could have broken out into something a bit more up tempo.
I'd like to think that the Maypole song kicked in. That, like, all those kids come along and the boing, 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 would start kicking in if he had cheated. One of the things I wanted to say is that, like, for the whole movie, and there is some nighttime stuff, isn't there? Like you see, like when they go to the Green Man, and when they like obviously through that bit through the seduction, but to a large part, and this is something that I don't think I appreciated again until later, is this is horror in daylight, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all in the daytime.
And this is one of the there isn't a lot of it, even subsequently, but certainly at the time there wasn't. And I think what a bold and brave decision to kind of take everything. So Hammer House, I'm not saying they didn't have scenes in daytime, but majority of the bad stuff happened at night, and the majority of the horror happened at night.
Yeah.
But of course, the big horror parts of this, and the big horror parts of this, so the burning alive, is happening in daylight. The chase scene happening in daylight, when they're actually in the parade. When you would start to look at, like, and again, I always lean into the Punch costume being horrible, but that kind of scariness of people in costumes when you don't know who they are and you don't know their intent. But in so many other films, they'd always be done at night. And I think, again, a real testament to this is that they managed to. One of the things you often see in horror movies and horror tropes is they take very comfortable settings for us and make it uncomfortable. She'll never thank me for saying this, but generally, there's not a horror movie me missus can watch without her, during or after, if she needs to go to the toilet, making me stand outside and guard the toilet, because there's often a scene in a toilet or a bathroom. And so she kind of goes, why do they do that? Because now I'm scared of going to the bathroom. And I go, that's why they do it. Because one of the things is to make you unsettled somewhere where you normally feel safe.
Yep.
Now, nighttime's the scariest time, isn't it? Kids are scared of the dark, Well, again, flipped it on its head here. Daytime is a scary time for this movie. You don't get any of the big malicious parts of it. In fact, all they tend to do in nighttime in this movie is just sleep around a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much whether an intentional thing or an accident of a nod to it. But, like, back in proper pagan prehistory times, there's no street lights, there's no torches. Yeah. Like, people did their shit in the daylight hours, and then of an evening, that was it. Just go and sit in a hut, go to bed. There wasn't a nightlife, essentially. Just people got up when it was light and went to bed when it was dark. So whether that kind of is a bring over for it intentionally, or whether it was just more expensive to film in the dark and too much of a hassle to set up lighting rigs and other bits and pieces, who knows? But yeah, I think being in the daytime is one of the unsettling things, because again, once you've gone through it once and you go through it again, like, everything's in plain sight. Everything, nothing is hidden. Nothing is hidden. Nothing. Everything that is said, spoken, uttered, it all builds on the story and pushes it forward. There's never a surprise reveal, or apart from until the very end, coming out through the caves. That's the big surprise. Shit, they're gonna fucking burn this dude alive. Yeah.
But as we said, as much as, like, there's an initial surprise, that surprise is very quickly followed by, oh yeah, of course they are. Mm-hmm. Of course that's what this has been about. Almost a bit of a why didn't I see it? But not in a bad way, in a good way.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of movies don't do that. A lot of movies you have to watch it 4 times before you're convinced that the stuff actually makes sense. Things like that. Whereas this slots in straight away. And for me, it's a masterpiece. And I say a masterpiece. I use that term. I try to use it sparingly, but on some of these things, I often use it. But then I try to lean into shit I actually like when we do these things. I think it's hopefully it's come across in talking about it, like how much I loved it and what I loved about it. But and I said it earlier, one of the things, I guess the last thing I want to pick up on, and then we'll kind of go to your thoughts and feelings on it and stuff like that, is the timelessness of this. So as much as the clothes they're wearing might age them, and the fact that there's no mobile phones because there wasn't, might age them, but I mean the timelessness of the concepts and the theories that are in there. So and there's a life lesson here for me. So upon rewatching it and I've rewatched it twice in the last couple of weeks because it hit me so hard the first time I watched it. I wanted to watch it again, and it's to go back to. I love a story that touches on religion. I'm fascinated by it because I am not a religious person, but I'm fascinated in anyone who can believe, who can make leaps of faith. But it was actually pulling away from the religious side of it, and it was that the big message I took from it this time, and I guess the timelessness, is that it doesn't matter whether it's religion, doesn't matter whether it's Conservative or Labour, doesn't matter whether it's any of this. What I think this does an amazing job at is going, not even so much there's two sides to every argument, but it's very easy to turn into Howie, isn't it? It's very easy to be the zealot for something, to be the I am right and everyone else is wrong. And I know that I've done that, and I know that I've done that on subjects, and I know I've done that with people that I know, and it's made me mindful to do it less. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there are times where other people are wrong. You know, like there is a right and wrong on some things, isn't there? But probably not objective things. You know, like mathematics are. You know, if someone starts going 2 + 2 = 17, I'm going to go dick off.
Yeah.
Like, but I think that impassioned belief that your belief is right and their belief is wrong, but based off of what? And I think I'm not going to say that I'm never going to rant about something or rant at someone before if I think they've fundamentally missed something. But I think being much more willing and much more open to go, my side isn't totally right though. Like, and to be willing to kind of, before I berate the other side, look at myself and go, well, what am I really doing here? Like, what am I trying to achieve here? Where are my rights? Where are my wins? Where are my wrongs? And I think it's a message a lot of people could really, really buy into, because I think we do have, specifically at the moment, quite a culture of attack.
Yes.
Rather than listen. And as I say, I know I can be guilty of this, and I do try to not to. I like to try and ask questions because I want to understand why other people think differently to me. And I know that sometimes those questions can come across as an attack. And sometimes tonally, yes, maybe you are having a bit of an attack with it. But I think seeking to understand others is where we probably should be. But where we're probably at societally is attack them because they're different, attack them because I think I'm right, or probably the truth of it is attacking someone else's argument is easier than justifying your own, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pointing out the one thing that is daft about someone else will buy you, and I'll go to the politics side here. This is how political arguments are done in the world now, isn't it? Of going, it's not about telling the world what I will do or what I will make better or how I will make it right. It's about telling you that the other person did something stupid that you don't agree with.
Yeah. And for not agreeing with them, then you have no common ground. You have no commonality, which is shocking, really. And this is a 49-year-old film, isn't it? And that's not to say that the world has changed dramatically, because again, probably one of the prompts for this is that people were seeing this, be it politics at the time or religion or something like that. But I think that's what makes it so timeless. And the shame of it is that probably we haven't moved on, have we? In 49 years, we and some people have, and some people, and some of the things in the world have progressed, but we are still as susceptible to that as we ever were. And I think it's a great watch for everyone. Will everyone pick up that part of the message? No, not everyone sees things in the same way, but I think that's why it's such an important movie and why it's such a great movie is it has a relevant message across the time, but across multiple subject matters, because it really speaks to us as humans. When I said earlier about, do I think it really plants a foot in the camp of are pagans right or Catholics right? Is one of these the bad guy? Mm-hmm. I think, maybe there's some leans, but I think generally no, because for me, I look at it now and I go, because the point of this is Catholicism right? Is paganism right? I think it's more about going, are we right? Whichever side of the camp you're on, unless you're kind of anti-Nazi or having a go at a serial killer, there's probably more than just your belief system that you're applying to this. And so be willing and open to listen to others and find out about why they feel what they feel or what they think. Yeah, definitely. I just think that it is that it is the sense of the other that is the overriding core of it. It is when something is just so bizarre, like how is it immediately? Is it going to be judged as being right or wrong? Is it evil what the pagans are doing? Is Howie a fool for having his belief system? It's like you say. It just I think it's that commonality thing that as people we develop these different ideas and theories, and a lot of that, let's not beat around the bush, comes out of ignorance. People didn't know that the Earth went round the sun. People didn't know that like the sun is going to come up tomorrow morning. Like it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter how many sacrifices you make, but without that knowledge of that certainty, then belief systems grow around these things. They, you know, what's Jesus and the resurrection? It's the answer to like the existential crisis about what happens when we die. Which, if people really sat down and thought about death and gave it way too much attention, most people end up driving themselves fucking mad. Because this is what these things are. These things are so massive to comprehend, and when you don't have science, like the scientific basis and knowledge that can explain this stuff away, maybe that's what's so different about nowadays. Because you know, science has pretty much worked out the very end of the universe, how long it's going to take for the heat death of the universe, and then there'll be nothing. There'll be no stars. There'll be no light. It would have all just faded away, and
becomes less exciting when they're giving you that spoiler,
exactly. And when Brian Cox is on TV telling you that, again, that's the other flip side of it. It is like just that existential dread about the universe is just going to fade away to nothing, and nothing matters. It is just that. But yeah, at least with religion, you've got heaven and everything else and paradise at the end that at least kind of buoys you up. And with paganism, you know, we'll kill this person and we'll get good crops again. It's
you said, I mean, like as a singular human being, like the idea, and this is something that I do. I believe, I guess it's the opposite of I believe in, but I am someone who goes, there's nothing, there is nothing. Like for me, and again, I guess it's what feels right or what my brain is willing to go to, but this is finite. So I had a start, I'll have an end, nothing else. Now, I will say that luckily, so far, I haven't had that crisis moment. But yeah, when I really sit there and think about it, I just kind of go, ooh. Like, because it could end just like that, couldn't it? And so it is hard, but you know, like I guess for me, what I come to terms with of try and do things I enjoy. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this, and I wanted to talk to lovely people like yourself about things that we enjoy, and I kind of lean into that. But I guess the other side of it is that not only does it provide the ability for a lot of people to not just crumble, because it is really hard not to kind of just go, what the fucking point then? But of course, it does then also allow for a societal system to be in place, doesn't it? You know, it is kind of a set of rules and guidelines that then everyone pays to, because you follow that kind to its natural endpoint, or a endpoint, maybe rather its natural endpoint of going. So also, if it doesn't matter if I am good or bad, why would I be good?
Yeah.
And I know that's a bit reductive, but like those kind of guidelines that says, well, I won't go and just go down the road and take everything that person worked really hard to get. These sort of barriers, I know laws are there for that as well, but these are the sort of like kind of rule systems that come in that allow
spiritual barrier will always. If you're going to talk about someone's eternal soul, then they're probably far more likely. I mean, you know, when you get people,
it's an anarchy control, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, it was the primary function of population control. Just, you know, thou shalt not. There's your set of rules. It's ingrained right from the start. So, and I think paganism could be thought to be the antithesis of that, but it's like, well, no, clearly not. There are rules in this as well. That's what Howie says at the end about if your crops fail next year, they'll sacrifice you, Lord SummerIsle.
Yeah.
So, and again, I think he was a little bit put back by that, was Lord SummerIsle, but
and you know,
he
like
still had that belief about it, didn't he? So
that's why I like the balance. Like that's why I feel like it's balanced, because as much as like all the way through it, I felt like paganism almost got the wins. You know, it was getting the wins because it was showing that they're not too different. These two things may be, but at the end, like there was that moment where he was going, but what if? What if this doesn't happen? What's next? And it could be you. And again, I think like often that's the way, isn't it? Of we want to be part of something, we want to be part of a community, we want to be part of a group, we want to be part of a religion or something like that. But actually, when there's a direct threat to the self, that's sometimes when you don't want to be part of that group anymore because you kind of go, well, actually, that's changed my mind a bit. One of the things I wanted to ask you was, and because you have a unique perspective to me, because I do not have a child, you have a child, and what a fantastic child you have. Would you recommend this movie to your child? And not necessarily right now, like at an age, but like when we're kind of talking about like what's good, what's bad, what's a success, and things like that. I often think like if you would kind of tee this up to a nearest and dearest and say, no, at the right stage, you need to watch this because it'd be important. It's a good judgment point for whether like the artistic merit or whatever of a project.
Oh no, absolutely. That 100% recommend it. And have a
That's
watch
what I was
it.
hoping you'd say because I do. I think it's a great movie. I think when people arrive at it might be quite important.
Yeah.
Like as I say, I think as much as I loved it, I probably did arrive at it too soon. Maybe add on another 4 or 5 years. I think like the certificate of 18. I know it's kind of not so fashionable. You rarely see certificate things anymore, but I do actually, rather than the content being violent or anything like that, I do actually think there's certain points maybe in your life where, like, God, if I watched this at 7, I wouldn't have a clue. I wouldn't have understood it probably in the slightest. But I think like a level of maturity and life experience assists this movie. But I don't mean you have to be 50 to watch it. I mean, probably like just outside of school age or something like that. So you're starting to form your opinions on the world, and I think it's a great watch at that point. I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, maybe even would lose something now because it's not something, and no one. We grew up again putting Church of England on everything. We had religion and stuff like that on every form we ever filled out. I don't think Tills is ever going to have that. So maybe that distance and from like just religion and state being so tied together, it's not these days. So I don't know, maybe it might lose something at that point, but they do IRS at school, so I think she should be more than aware about the mechanics of Catholicism and what the beliefs are and stuff like that. So I think it would still resonate. I mean, exactly for the same reasons as like it did 50 odd years ago.
When you say that, like educationally, I mean, like I sort of said, like I was taken to Sunday school and stuff like that because that's my family. But I guess I've totally forgotten is that actually at my school you were taught that as a religion. There was no recognition that anything else existed, and in fact, if anything, you probably would have been hounded out of school if you suggested that there was any other religion other than the one true God, etc., etc., etc. So we did grow up at a different time for that, and maybe like it felt a bit dangerous because of that. Maybe there was a bit of excitement, but also, I mean, I say bearing in mind like my non-religious status, it was probably things like this that pushed me long term, set me on a path of questioning. And I think that sort of path of questioning, and not just this, there were other things in my life that set me down there, and to go back to the selling point of it is really enjoyable. For one, it is a really enjoyable movie with a great story, but it will make you, it will encourage you to ask questions that you don't really ask about yourself. And I'll watch a popcorn flick, I'll watch all manner of films, but I do like a film to stay with me. I do like a film to make me question. It doesn't mean necessarily that I have to change my beliefs or change the way I do things, but at least make me question it. Like if 4 or 5 days after watching a movie, it's still running through my head of going, and not just like, what a great explosion, but like stuff is actually going through and going, how do I process that? Then for me, you've made an excellent movie at that point. And that's where this sits with me.
I think there's also a little bit, there's a bit of anti-authoritarianism in it as well. And again, that's on I think on both sides of it, because obviously it doesn't do anything for Howie, doesn't save him being in that position, and then having the Lord SummerIsle, that position of authority isn't what he thought it was because the beliefs behind it are different. And I think ultimately, the pagans have the authority and the power in the film because he's been led the whole way. So they've had that total control over him as an individual from the moment he sat on the island. And again, I think it's the final shot when the sun comes up. You can almost imagine the sun just turning around and seeing the Wicker Man and just being like, "The fuck you done that for? He was all right." And it's got nothing to do. It's just that complete indifference. Just stuff will just keep going round and round and round. It's so the most negative. You could argue that the writer's saying like, "There's no point to any belief system because it ain't going to matter a jot of difference," or you can take away the strength and the belief of the pagans at the end, or you can take away the strength and the belief of Howie and Catholicism at the end. It's that's the thing about it. I think it's ultimately quite ambiguous, but also it doesn't. But yeah, ambiguous. It just doesn't land down on anything too hard. It is just that the unsettling nature of. I think it's just people with different systems of beliefs in their minds, just trying to.
But we want that, don't we? I think as an audience, we want it to. I said earlier about that, getting you to ask questions, and I think if it was so obvious that it firmly was going, this is bad, this is good, I think it loses so much of its power. I don't think we're talking about it 49 years later for this long. If it was as simple as that, because I think then it would have been lost in the shuffle of kind of going, okay, that was let's say they lent into paganism, written by someone who clearly thinks paganism is good, probably more so has an issue with organized Western modern religion, let's say, and that can be a powerful story, but again, I don't think it's a powerful story that would resonate this much later, that hasn't been retold many times later. Whereas, yes, I think that leading us to the conclusion of going, this is about you, and this is about you questioning where you are in the world. But when we say questioning where you are in the world, questioning the world around you, but in a healthy way, and not pointing over there and go, they do things differently, they're weird, they're rubbish. Not going my way because I read it in a book, and I'll go with the Bible on this. Read it in a book that, like, ostensibly someone puts in front of you as a child and says, this is real. And you believe it, whereas there's not many other things in life that you put in front of you at that age that 25 years later you're expected to just believe, full stop, without questioning it. As you said, science moves on and things move on, but religions don't, or the doctrines of original text don't move on.
So the doctrine doesn't move on, so therefore the way of thinking can't move on. So it is. It is locked. It's a time capsule, isn't it? It's a stasis. It's the element of control, which is what any state wants, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. So I want to put a warning out now, because we've waxed lyrical about how good this is, and if you haven't seen it, watch it. Even though, like, kind of, you've now heard how it ends, it is still just a wonderful piece. Visually great, sound great, acting great. There is a warning here. There is a remake. Don't watch that one by mistake.
I haven't yet. I do love Mr. Cage, but that's one that it was just like, nah.
The thing is, it's terrible. It really is terrible. I won't go into what it is. I don't want to give it too much even discussion time. Now, when I say don't watch it, it is terrible. I mean, don't watch it before the 1973 one. Like, for anyone who hasn't seen the 1973 one, watch that first, because if you watch the Nicolas Cage one, you won't go back and watch the 1973. But the remake is so bad, I think it could be argued it's good. It's really bad Nicolas Cage. Like, and the only other thing I wanted to ask is, have you seen the sequel of The Wicker Man?
What is that? The Midsummer?
No, Wicker Tree.
No, I haven't.
Now, this come out, and again, it's same director. It's I think it's Robin Hardy's the director.
Yeah.
He didn't do a lot outside of it, but I'm sure I've got it up here somewhere. And they come back many years later. In fact, let's have a look. 2011.
God bloody hell!
And they make the Wicker Tree. Now, I say the sequel. Now, I've seen this, but the fact I remember absolutely zero about it, and I certainly don't remember it fondly, I think probably tells a bit of a tale of going. I don't think it's like a belter, but I would say it's more of a spiritual successor. Right?
Okay.
It's a folk horror, and it leans into. I mean, it's about a tree. For one, but it kind of leans into that stuff. But that's pretty much all I've got from it. But it was a bit of an oddity because, again, we look at like how conventional movies are made or the movie system. You don't tend to get the sequel made by the same director. What that would have been in 2011? That would have been 38 years later, or was it 28 years? Yeah, well, either way, a long period in between. But they finally kind of come back to it. But
well, like Ridley Scott and Aliens.
Yeah, count that. Well, I don't know what happened to that. But you know, as I say, a spiritual successor, and there is a sequel out there. But yeah, my memories are. I remember more about the remake because that was really bad, and I think Wicker Tree probably just fell into that category of going, "Oh my god, there's just nothing here. There's nothing even worth remembering." So yeah, there is other Wicker Man stuff, and I am intrigued, and I think I'm going to get this. The Wicker Man, as much as the Anthony Schaefer gets all the credit in the thingy, it is based off a book. It's based off a book called The Ritual, isn't it?
Yes.
And I have never read it, but I do think now that I've been looking into this and kind of realised it's out there, I think I will probably pick that up in the near future just to see. And I get the feeling it devolves quite a lot. I think the screenplay and turn it into a movie because there's lots to talk about how SummerIsle was particularly designed for Christopher Lee, etc., etc. But I am quite intrigued to go and find that and give it a read just to see what the source material actually was like. So yeah, there is other Wicker Man stuff out there. Approach with caution, other than the original, I would say.
Yeah, no, can't go wrong with just watching the original.
Now, I don't want to cut you off, but and I don't want to lose you from my life, but also I don't want to make you wait on here forever, ever and a day. But I wanted to make sure, is there anything else that you wanted to specifically cover about our watching experience before we shift on to goodbyes and kisses to audience members?
No, I think that we hit all of the pertinent points that we were going to talk about. I think again, like don't let the look of the film put you off if you haven't seen it, because you know it's like American 80s TV looks very washed out and orange and it's oversaturated. Sorry, it's like it's not pleasant camera work. And with Wicker Man, yeah, it's like you're talking 50-year-old technology, but it does not mean that the story is poor. There isn't an ounce of fat on the story. Like every line and scene propels it forward. There's just nothing that isn't needed on there. Like it's just edited excellently. So yeah, just be brave. Don't, like, black and white film, don't worry about it. Just put it on and enjoy it. It's
focus on the content,
old style, but just don't worry. It's the substance.
Yeah, as I say, focus on the substance rather than the style, because do you know what? I think the style will. I think if you focus on the substance, you'll fall in love with the style as well. It might be jarring at first, as you say, but I think, and when I say it might be jarring at first, and I think going forward, hopefully, I'll be able to convince you into maybe dipping into a few of the more modern folk horror stuff that I really, really like. And stylistically, they try and film it like this now. They are jumping back because again, you said about the League of Gentlemen. I think a lot of people who get into horror, they have a massive reverence for this movie, and you can see it. I mean, certainly and I say modern horror, like last decade of horror, and folk horror has been making a real big comeback. And the ones that I really like, I mean, some of them just are like a direct homage to this, but you can just see the DNA in it, and a lot of that DNA is the way that it's filmed. And as you say, it's grainy. It was what it was done at the time, and also in some of those cuts, like this is old film, and there are parts of the movie that have just disappeared. So like the original, like kind of the original reel of it and stuff like that as long and forgotten. But there are bits that were cut to the editing floor that these days, you know, everything's kind of packaged up on a DVD and a Blu-ray. In fact, if anything, like nothing's probably lost, even some of the most innocuous stuff. This shit, it doesn't exist for this movie.
No,
it did exist, but it doesn't exist anymore. But
there's clearly points in the film where they are going from one reel to a completely different one. There's suffered some degradation. It's even grainier. I think you can look at that and you could argue that, oh yes, that's an artistic shot. That's why they're using that kind of grain on it. It's like, no, it's not. It's just the best old bit of footage they could find as a deleted scene or something to work into it. So, but yeah, it's certainly nothing that's going to ruin the viewing experience for you.
So, as your first ride on the Fright Train with me, will you be willing to come back on the train again?
I think so.
The idea of this is, as I say, to talk. We went with horror as a genre, but because of stuff we said earlier, like we said about horror and sci-fi, I think where horror has an advantage over a lot of the genres is it's so far and wide in quality, quantity, style, etc., etc. So I think it's kind of interesting from that regard. But I want to have you back on the train, so we'll definitely get you back on the train. So yeah, there will be future episodes where we'll cover other movies. We haven't really talked about what yet, but we'll do that. We'll do that off camera. But other than that, like for anyone who's watched, thank you very much. Please leave a comment for us to let us know what you think of the Wicker Man, or if you haven't watched the Wicker Man, let us know that you're going to watch the Wicker Man. And other than that, we'll see you next time when we board that choo-choo train.